Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. Bring in part 17 of What If Sonic and his friends were in Remnant. Link in the description of the fanfiction of this What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 37, A Different Kind of Homecoming. It would be a long trip to Menagerie, it's already been a couple days since leaving Patch and parting with everyone, but that's alright. She was used to traveling alone. Alone. Suddenly that didn't sound as appealing as it did before. She knew deep down though, that wasn't the case. This was only temporary, it was part of her mission, to rally allies to their cause, and search her home for any Chaos Emeralds. She would see them all again, the beloved friends that she had made, the people who have made a lasting impact on her life and helped to open her heart which was once closed off. So why did it still feel so lonely? Leaning along the railing of the wooden ship she rode on, Blake Belladonna stared out into the ocean, wearing only a white jacket over her normal clothes to keep herself warm from the chill air despite the sun hanging overhead. With nothing else to do, she pulled out her scroll and began to skim through some of the photos on there. Specifically, the photos that RWBY, Sonic, Amy, and Yang took with their own scrolls and shared with her and everyone else. She saw pictures ranging from their first group shot together as Team RWBY. She and Weiss weren't the only one smiling there, but it still looked good. She also saw some pictures of the food fight her team, Team JNPR, and Team Sonic all partook in, including the aftermath with everyone laughing and covered in slime, as well as the aftermaths of various battles against the Grim and Badniks, with the likes of Sonic, Nora, and Yang flashing peace signs and RWBY cheering as loudly as she could. As she saw all these pictures, she couldn't help but smile. Then she happened to scroll over a picture of an online news article she saved a while ago, one that showed the fuzzy image of Super Sonic flying through the night sky, with the headline, "Who is the Golden Hero?" written at the top. The minute she saw that, so many feelings swept through her. She remembered seeing Super Sonic for the first time, the brilliant golden glow and shining red eyes, and yet despite his godly form, he still carried the same carefree disposition of the blue hedgehog she had met. And yet, he performed the impossible and annihilated a continent's worth of Grim and saw to it that all of Vale was forever Grim-free. She would never forget what happened that night, nor would she forget what she had learned before and after, about the teachers she had trusted being part of a secret conspiracy operating in the moral gray area against an immortal witch hell-bent on destroying all life on the world she called home. Nor would she forget just how devastated RWBY and Yang in particular were upon learning that their own family was deeply involved in said conspiracy. On one end, she understood the secrecy and why they felt they had to abide such choices, but that didn't mean she'd have to like it. She thought she was done with all of the morally questionable stuff upon leaving the White Fang and finally on a force that was firmly on the side of good. She also hated just how hurt her teammates and friends were because of that. And as much as she wanted to be with them, to help support and get them through whatever emotional turmoil they are going through, she was at least content to know that Sonic, Knuckles, and the others were watching over them and giving them the help they needed. But that didn't mean she wouldn't miss them. But she knew her mission and what had to be done, and for all their sake, and the sake of her home, she would see it through to the end. The Golden Hero. Being briefly startled, Blake quickly reached for her sheathed weapon on her back, only to see a rather large individual, wearing an old-style trench coat, a black fedora, and for some reason, an enormous scarf covering most of his face, including something over what appeared to be an elongated jaw with the individual trying hard to hide it. Whoa, sorry. Didn't mean to startle ya. Just trying to check out the news. Don't have a phone or anything, so I can't tell what was going on. The individual raised his hands up. Blake briefly looked at the man who was clearly wearing some kind of disguise to hide himself. She didn't recognize the voice, but she didn't pick up any hostility from him either, so she briefly lowered her guard. Kinda easy to be scared of a man covering his whole face. Blake commented. Sorry, not a creeper or anything if that's what you're wondering. The individual replied. But my face ain't exactly common around here, and I don't wanna startle some folks. She raised a curious eyebrow. Was he a faunus trying to hide his face? She certainly understood that, but it did seem a bit over the top. The most she'd seen were faunus having lizard-like skin, or even one with a duckbill for a mouth, but that was a rare oddity. Again though, she could tell that this individual was not trying to harm her, so she decided to leave it be. Didn't mean to sound insensitive. I'm sorry. She apologized. No harm done, he replied before leaning against the railing casually. So, this golden hero guy, sounds like a big deal. Only the biggest deal in all of Remnant. Everyone's talking about him, Blake said, looking back at her scroll and the image of the news article. Bet people don't normally see things like that around here, huh? Nope. Not every day something wipes out an entire army of Grimm. Blake replied. Grimm, yeah, I'm also a bit concerned about the robot army that apparently attacked that school. That's pretty big talk too. The disguised individual said. Blake looked very serious at the mention of that. Eggman, the man who recruited the White Fang, only to quickly discarded the entire Vale branch and leave them all for dead. While Adam and his group of terrorists arguably had that coming, it still made her blood boil to know that someone took advantage of all her people's pain and suffering and aimed it at so many innocent people, including her, and even got them all killed so recklessly. More than anything, she wanted to make Eggman pay. Yeesh, sensitive subject I take it. The person next to her commented, noticing her growing anger. A lot of people died, she practically growled. Anyone you knew? A few, she looked away. Though Blake was fortunate that none of those closest to her lost their lives, she still heard of a few casualties among her classmates, including Cardin's whole team. Even if she was at odds with them, she would never wish something like death upon them. I'm sorry, the person said sincerely, causing Blake's look to soften somewhat. Sure hope that golden hero does something about it. He is, Blake muttered before realizing what she just said. At least, I hope so. Right as she said that though, she could feel this individual gazing at her, almost as if he was trying to analyze or ascertain her. She still picked up no hostility, but this didn't feel very comfortable. Unbeknownst to her, two pairs of eyes had set their sights on her and the individual next to her from a partially opened storage compartment on the deck nearby. Uh-oh, think he's caught. I do not believe we have anything to fear from these passengers. A few may seem armed, but none carry any hostility. I'm hoping we can find out more about the others. Maybe they know what's going on here. One can hope. Wait. What is it? Somebody else is listening in. Where? Look at the upper deck, close to the bridge of the ship. One of the set of eyes looked upwards slightly towards the aforementioned direction, where they spotted an individual wearing a hooded robe to cover their whole body. And they were looking towards Blake and the disguised person next to her. Think he could be trouble. I still sense no hostility, but I would be cautious nonetheless. Back near Blake, the individual in the coat and hat looked towards the partially open door on the deck with a serious expression before noticing something in the water. A red fin that briefly breached the surface before sinking back down. So, the Grimm, they're everywhere, aren't they? Unfortunately, Blake replied. And with the attack on Beacon, there's a chance they might be more active. Does that include any that can swim? She looked at him somewhat questionably. What do you mean? Because I think there's one here in the water. Looking out towards the sea with a serious expression, Blake's yellow eyes darted in every direction across the surface of the water, her cat ears underneath her bow stuck up as she listened closely for any sign of trouble. Unaware of the person next to her making some hand motions towards the storage compartment where two other people remained hidden. Only for the boat to suddenly and violently shake as if it had hit something underneath. Blake almost lost her balance, but the coat-wearing person next to her had caught her, just as a large shadow loomed over both of them. Turning around slowly, they looked up to see an enormous Grimm that bore the appearance of a serpentine-like dragon with short arms along the side, and a large skull for its head. It set its soul-piercing glowing yellow eyes on the boat before giving a deathly roar. This was a sea phylong. Red alert. One of the crewmen called out, causing alarms to ring all over the ship and the passengers to run back inside, while the captain and a few crewmen came to the upper deck just outside the bridge to see the Grimm for themselves. By the gods, the captain muttered in fear. All hands to battle stations. Blake was the first act, dashing to the front of the boat. Hey, wait. The coat-wearing person tried to call to her, but she had already leapt off the deck, and used her semblance to create a shadow clone, which she grabbed before swinging herself at the sea phylong's face. She threw Gamble's shroud out, the blade piercing through its bone snout while swinging herself via her weapon's ribbon to appear behind her before pulling her weapon back and shooting at the back of its head. Only for the tail to bend in from behind and smack her to send her falling towards the ocean. "Charmy! Grab her!" the coat-wearing person called out. Something fast flew out through the storage compartment and intercept Blake before she could land smack dab in the water. The Faunus girl looked up with a gasp to see who had caught her and was keeping her in the air. It was a yellow and black stripped anthropomorphic bee, orange amber eyes, wearing an orange zip-up vest with a bee emblem on the left side, orange and white sneakers cuffed with black rings, white gloves also cuffed with black rings, black shoulder pads, and a pilot's helmet and sliver flight goggles. "Hey, are you okay?" the bee said, sounding rather young, as he flew the shocked Blake down back to the boat. Yeah," she answered instinctively. This bee, while she should be shocked by the appearance of a giant talking bumblebee, she was more shocked by how familiar his appearance was. He looked almost like. The sea Phylong's roar interrupted her thoughts as the giant Grim shot itself towards the ship, evading the fire from the cannons that appeared on the boat's side and quickly making its way to the front. Blake was ready to take it on, drawing Gamble's shroud again. Only for the same coat-wearing person she was just talking with to appear directly in front of her and the giant bee, pull back his fist, and give a vicious uppercut to its jaw with enough force to send it careening upward, much to her shock. "Espio!" he called out. Right as he did, a blur shot above him to meet the recoiling sea Phylong up in the air, and quickly catch it by its bony face. The individual who held on was a fuchsia-skinned anthropomorphic chameleon with a yellow horn between his gold eyes. His attire consisted only of white gloves, purple shoes, and purple pads on his arms and legs. He drew a kunai in his free hand and drove it into the sea Phylong's right eye. This caused the creature to throw itself violently to throw the chameleon off. Though he was quickly caught by his bee companion and set down by the still shocked Blake and the coat-wearing individual. "I removed one of its eyes, so its right side should be more vulnerable now. But I doubt it will fall so easily," the chameleon said. "So much for being undercover, huh Vector?" the bee said to the coat-wearing person. Kinda hard to hide this gorgeous face anyway." The tallest one in the group threw off his coat, hat, and scarf to reveal his full self, something that caused Blake to look in even further shock. The individual who stood before her was a large, green-skinned anthropomorphic crocodile with spiky red spikes going down his tail, a light green-skinned underbelly, and goldenrod eyes. His attire consisted of a pair of headphones over his head, a golden chain around his neck, white gloves, black wristbands with yellow stripes, and black boots. "You fight pretty good, miss. But we'll handle it from here," the crocodile apparently named Vector said as he cracked his knuckles. "Right, boys. Right," the chameleon named Espio said seriously. "Yeah, let's do it," the bee named Charmy cheered. "Avast, ye scurvy dog." Vector pointed to the growling sea Phylong challengingly. "You're about to face the wrath of Team Chaotix." The continent of Solitas, the northernmost continent on the planet, mostly consisted of ice and snow. At first glance, it seemed rather unpleasant for anyone to live in, and yet it was also the home of the most advanced kingdom in all of Remnant. And that was the current destination of the cyclone as it flew straight through the frigid air, the cold wasteland down below. The titular blue plane had a glass canopy over its cockpit as its pilot and passenger continued to make their way closer to the destination. "All right, I sent a message to General Ironwood that we'd be arriving soon, so we shouldn't be expecting all that much trouble," Tails said as he piloted the plane. "At least not for arrival, anyway," Weiss replied, before gazing out the canopy at the cold environment around her with a hard expression, something the fox noticed as he glanced back. "I kinda figured you'd be at least a little happy to be coming back home," Tails commented. "I know you said how things weren't easy for you growing up, but there have to be some good memories here, right?" "Some," Weiss confirmed. "There are people that I am looking forward to seeing again. They just so happen to be in the same place as the one person that I would much rather prefer not to see again." Tails knew exactly who she was talking about. He never met the man personally, but based on what he heard, he could at least take a guess that the individual in question was not exactly Father of the Year material. "Do you think we can expect any trouble from your dad?" Tails asked. "Depends on what you mean by trouble," Weiss replied, still looking out the window. As in, someone who would be a physical threat or a danger to any individual in a life or death battle. No. But as an emotionally manipulative and abusive man who wouldn't hesitate to take advantage of those around him. Yes, absolutely. Tails looked with sympathy. You don't have to do this, you know. We could still. I appreciate what you're trying to do, Tails. Really. Weiss stopped him. But Eggman somehow has ties to the Schnee Dust Company. He's already acquired enough dust to fuel his army, having already staged an assault on Beacon. We have to cut him off here, and I'm the only one who can get close enough to find out what those ties are. And if I have to swallow my pride, she sighed before speaking again. Then I'll do it. Tails smiled towards her. Well, if he tries anything with you, just let me know. I'm no Sonic, but I would be more than happy to put him back in his place. Weiss chuckled. Thank you, Tails. I have a feeling that I might need that help. Suddenly, the cyclone was shook, like something had just hit it on all sides, rocking the two passengers inside. What was that? The cyclone's radar suddenly became active as multiple red dots appeared all over, with several shadows looming over them, followed by the sounds of buzzing, like what one would hear from insects, only much larger. Looking up and all around, Tails and Weiss saw a large swarm of Grimm, all resembling large hornets with rapidly flapping wings, and massive stingers at the end of their three-segmented bodies. Grimm, hang on. Tails took the controls and piloted the cyclone straight down to avoid the rapid thrusts of the hornet-like Grimm before they all flew after the plane. As they flew in pursuit, the frontmost hornet-like Grimm thrusted their lower bodies, lunging their stingers to be launched, which appeared to be tied to their bodies by some kind of organic tether, almost like harpoons. Tails did his best to avoid most of them, the cyclone spinning and curving around to dodge the projectiles, though a few did skid the hull a bit. They're Lancers. Weiss identified as Tails continued to pilot the ship. But, they're not native to Solitas. They shouldn't be here. We'll worry about that later. Right now, we need to move. Tails flew the cyclone closer towards the ground, going straight for a small mountain range, the swarm of Lancers being right behind them. Weiss had created a black glyph at her feet. Open the cockpit, she stated, prompting Tails to do so as she stood up, her feet being connected to the ground by her black glyph as she turned to face the incoming behind them. She drew Mertenaster, making sure it was loaded with dust before attacking. She aimed her sword towards the swarm of Lancers, erecting 3 glyphs around her, infusing them with fire dust to launch a series of fireballs at the incoming swarm. A few of the frontmost Lancers were taken down, but the rest were able to avoid it. Tails saw what she was trying to do and accelerated the cyclone faster towards the mountains. It's gonna be a tight squeeze. He flipped the cyclone so that its wings were now vertical, but Weiss kept focus on her black glyph to keep herself grounded in the plane before seeing all the Lancers clumped together in the narrow space. She saw Tails' intent and smirked, reminiscently of a certain blue hedgehog she knew, and erected a large glyph in front of her and unleashed a large blast of lightning, which not only blew apart most of the Lancers at the front, but even created an explosion that shook up the rocky walls, sending multiple rocks flying to smash even more Lancers, eliminating half the swarm in one shot. Keep it as tight as possible, Tails. Weiss told him. We'll take them down in. However, something large had hit them from directly below, sending the cyclone spiraling and crashing hard against the narrow cavern walls. Weiss had lost her focus on her glyphs and would have fallen had Tails not reached out to catch her. I got you, he exclaimed, having caught her with one hand, while still using his other hand on the controls. Tails, wall, Weiss screamed, alerting him to the incoming cliffside they were about to crash into. No time to think on it, Tails extended his dual namesake appendages to wrap around the controls and used all his strength to pull up hard, while grabbing Weiss with both of his hands to haul her back inside just as the cyclone curved upward, moving at an angle before straightening out just before they made it to the top. Only to hit the top of the cliffside with enough force to vault Weiss and Tails out of the plane, which bounced and rolled across the snowy ground before crashing hard. Tails held onto Weiss and hovered in the air while still holding onto her, his own tails acting like a helicopter's propeller. Are you okay? Tails questioned. I'm fine, but what hit us? Weiss wondered. She would soon get her answer as something large hovered directly over them. It was a much larger Lancer, which was maybe 3 times the size of its smaller variety, evident as the remainder of the swarm regrouped around it and it eyed the two with deadly intent. "It's a queen," Weiss exclaimed. Of course, Tails' eyelids lowered as he set himself and Weiss down, seeing how they were quickly surrounded on all sides. Even if they eliminated half of the swarm, there still appeared to be well over 24 lancers. They quickly came back to back. "Looks like we're gonna have to fight our way out." Having already put on his backpack of Hurricane Gamma, Tails detached the wings and activated their light sword mode. "Not the homecoming I was hoping for," Weiss muttered as she held Mertenaster. The Queen Lancer gave a call to its smaller brethren, commanding them to go on the attack. All of the Lancers lunged their harpoon stingers at the pair, and they were more than prepared to fight back. Only for a large cyclone of fire to appear around the young fox and the Schnee heiress, the fire burning the stingers and forcing them to be retracted as all the Lancers backed away. Tails and Weiss looked in surprise at the sudden inferno that had protected them and found themselves looking directly up at where said inferno came from. Or rather, who? Hovering just above them, with small flames at her feet to keep her airborne, was a slim, lavender-furred, autapomorphic cat with golden eyes, a long tail, and 4 plumes of hair with violet tips tied back at her head like a ponytail and a red oval gem on her forehead. Her attire consisted of a purple tailcoat with rose trim and a gold collar, white leggings, white gloves with white fluffy cuffs, and high-heeled rose ankle boots also with white fluffy cuffs. Weiss looked up in surprise and awe, even as the fire died down and the cat landed to the ground with elegance and grace, all while Tails smiled as he recognized this cat instantly. "Blaze," he said with relief and excitement. "Hello, Tails." The cat apparently named Blaze smiled as she turned towards him before noticing the young lady by his side. "I assume this is a friend of yours." "Yep, her name's Weiss. I'd give you a proper introduction, but," he gestured around him to the swarm of Lancers. "I understand, you can fill us in later. For now, let us help you." Blaze accepted. What she said however, caught Weiss' attention. "I'm sorry, us." Suddenly, a large cluster of rocks and ice shards rained down from the sky, forcing all the Lancers back as a couple of them got crushed and skewered by the projectiles, all of which were covered by a cyan-colored aura. Several more objects were thrown out in all directions, forcing the Lancers even further back as the one responsible landed next to the group. The one in question was a hedgehog. Weiss' eyes widened as she saw him, her mind flashing briefly towards a certain blue hedgehog, so much so that she almost mistook him. But one glance at his back, and the color of his fur, and she knew that this was not the one she was thinking of. This hedgehog was not blue, but rather had light gray, almost silver-colored and white fur. He hovered in the air as a light cyan-colored aura encircled around him, turning around to reveal his golden eyes, as well as the 5 spines that flared up and back on his forehead, with 2 larger ones at the back of his head. His attire consisted only of white gloves with aqua-colored circles on his palms and lines that connected to par of golden cuffs on his wrists which also had aqua-colored rings on them, as well as black and white shoes with aqua-colored tips and golden cuffs on his ankles with aqua rings on them as well. "All right, Silver." Tails smiled widely. "Hey, Tails." The hedgehog waved friendly. "So, what's the deal with these things?" He gestured around him to the regrouping Lancers. "They're basically soulless monsters that live to kill and destroy." Tails summed up. "I'll fill you in on the details later." "Ah, I see." Blaze looked to Silver with a knowing smile as her fists were coated in flames. "So, if these things are soulless and not truly alive, then there's no need for us to hold back." The gray-furred hedgehog grinned as he was once again coated in a cyan-colored aura. Meanwhile, back on the ocean, the sea phylong recoiled in several ways to avoid all the cannon shots from the ship, prompting Charmy to fly at it buzzing up and around the giant dragon-like Grim that tried to bite down at him, but Charmy proved too quick for it. "Ha! Missed me," he taunted, leading to the sea phylong to snap at him again, but Charmy dodged it swiftly enough. Too slow. He blew raspberries at the Grim, the monster biting towards him again, but the young bee flew backwards, staying close enough to be within taunting range of the sea phylong, while moving quick enough to lure it closer to the ship where his teammates were waiting. "Espio, let's reel it in," Vector ordered. On it, Espio had a rope attached to his kunai, which he spun around before throwing it outward. "Charmy, heads up." Hearing his teammate call to him, Charmy spotted the roped kunai and quickly zoomed in to catch it, avoiding another bite from the sea phylong before quickly flying up, over and around the sea phylong's head to entangle it in the rope before driving the kunai into the back of the sea phylong's neck, while also simultaneously shooting through the serpentine grim, stinger first, and piercing through its throat. "I got it," Charmy shouted. "Let's go." Vector grabbed the rope and pulled backwards with enough strength to reel in the sea phylong. Despite its enormous size and constant flailing about, Vector was clearly strong enough to pull it closer to the ship and hold it still, much to the surprise of Blake. The only person she saw with that amount of raw physical strength was Knuckles. "I'll hold em down. You make sushi out of that thing." Espio was about to move in, only for a hooded figure to leap on top of his head and use him as a catapult to launch himself towards the restrained sea phylong. The one from before, Espio recognized the robbed figure, only for the figure to discard said robe and reveal himself as a certain monkey faunus that Blake recognized. "Son," she exclaimed in shock before rushing forward, with Espio right behind her. Drawing his weapons, RWBY Bang and Jingu Bang, in their combined nunchuck mode, Sun appeared on the restrained sea phylong's back and began to smash it, while also firing its shotgun mode. "Ha! You like that?" He flailed wildly with his weapon, smashing and shooting. Even as the phylong tried to fling its body around, despite Vector holding it back, Sun barely held on. "Hi there." Charmy greeted friendly as he hovered close by. "Hi." Sun greeted back. "Sun, what are you doing here?" Blake questioned as she appeared on the sea phylong's back as well. "Oh, you know, just hanging around." Sun answered as he held onto one of the Grimm's spines for support. Charmy laughed at that. "Hanging around. That's funny. Finally. Someone who appreciates my jokes." Sun said with a smile. "You can joke as much as you want, after we kill this abomination." Espio stated as he appeared on the phylong's back as well, a kunai in each hand. "And any time you wanna do that might be nice." Vector called out to them. "This rope isn't gonna hold for long." "You heard him. Let's go," Charmy declared as he and everyone else moved in on the attack. The bee flew up and around the sea phylong's body, zipping in every direction and slashing with his stinger. Espio, Blake, and Sun performed similar actions to one another, using their respective agility and abilities to move up and around the phylong's body to slash and smash with their respective weapons, moving at such speed that all four of them seemed blurs. The more damage they did, the more its armor began to chip off. But the harder Vector held, and the more it struggled, the more the rope began to tear. He only hoped they could finish it off before it fell apart. However, he glanced slightly past the flailing monster and noticed the fins on its back expanding and taking the shape of something that only flying creatures had. His eyes quickly widened. "It's got wings," Vector warned, alerting everyone present. The wings had quickly expanded outward, before flapping them to send a powerful gust of wind that knocked everyone else back. Though Charmy did recover in the air to quickly catch Espio, with Blake and Sun using their respective semblances to boost themselves and leap back towards the ship even as the gust of wind reached it and Vector. The crocodile stood firm, but the already strained rope ended up snapping from the force, freeing the beast as it took to the air. The sea phylong's mouth soon opened as a surge of lightning began to build up at the back of its throat. "It has a breath attack of some sort," Espio alerted. "I'll stop it." Charmy flew up to the now flying Grim as fast as he could and aimed his stinger, flying and smashing it in its blind spot on the right side of its head. The momentum Charmy brought with him was enough to force the sea phylong's head away, the resulting beam of lightning missing the ship and striking the water with explosive results. "Tell me you guys did some damage to it," Vector stated as he and the others regrouped while Charmy flew around the sea phylong to keep it distracted. "We chipped off bits of its armor, but given how Charmy was able to pierce through its throat, I say it has a high pain tolerance." Espio relayed. "You're not from around here, are you?" Blake asked. "That obvious, huh?" Vector asked. "You guys wouldn't happen to know a blue hedgehog who can run really fast, would ya?" Sun asked, much to their surprise. "You know Sonic?" Vector questioned. "Oh yeah, we go way back." Sun smiled, only for Blake to push him away and get back to the situation. "It's a long story, and I'll explain later. But you need to know, that thing doesn't feel any kind of pain at all." Blake pointed to the campaigning sea phylong that was engaged in an aerial battle with Charmy. "It doesn't have any blood or vital organs for you to strike." "So how does one kill such a creature?" Espio questioned. Usually by smashing a big enough hole or by blasting its head off. Sun answered. Can it heal? Vector asked. No. Blake shook her head. Espio, you said Charmy punched a hole through its neck, right? Vector asked his teammate. Clean through. The chameleon confirmed. Vector smirked. Alright, you guys find a way to clip its wings and get it back into the water. The water? Blake questioned. But it'll have a total advantage in there. So will I. Vector maintained his smirk. Oh, I get it. Sun snapped his fingers in realization. You're an alligator. You guys love the water. I'm a croc, not a gator. There's a difference. Vector's eyelids lowered. Sorry. Sun winced. And how are we supposed to get that far out? Blake questioned, only to gasp as she and Sun were picked up by Vector's enormous arms. I saw what you guys can do. You seem like the improvising type. Vector said as Espio clung onto Sun's back. So, improvise. He threw all three of them with enough force straight to the airborne sea phylong that Charmy continued to engage. The bee flew faster than the hovering beast could anticipate, striking his stinger wherever he could. Come on, stay focused on me. If I stay close, it won't use its lightning breath. And if I fly around here, it won't get too far away from Vector and Espio and they'll think of a way to bring it down. A high-pitched scream caught his attention. Turning and looking down somewhat, Charmy spotted the source of the scream, being Sun, as he and Blake soared through the air with Espio hanging on tight. They would have fallen into the water had Blake not used her semblance to create a shadow clone and boost herself forward, repeating the process until she got close enough to throw out Gamble's shroud, the blade piercing through the Serpentine Grimm's right wing. Sun, who stopped screaming, followed a similar lead as he used his semblance to create two glowing clones of himself. One caught his real form while the other caught Espio before throwing them towards the sea phylong's left wing. Espio acted faster, using one kunai to stab into the wing with one hand and catching Sun's hand with the other. Snap off its joint. Espio threw Sun upward while he himself leapt up to pierce and slash at the phylong's left wing repeatedly while Blake performed a similar action to tear through it. The monkey Faunus tossed out his weapon's nunchuck mode to hook onto the wing's left joint which he used to swing himself before firing its built-in gun repeatedly to snap off its left wing, causing the Grimm to rapidly lose altitude. Charmy, seeing what they were doing, decided to help by speeding forward and thrusting his stinger to pierce through the right joint and completely sever that wing. He flew down to catch Blake before she could even fall before moving to Espio and Sun, who were already falling. Catch them. Charmy said to Blake. While still holding onto Charmy with one hand, she reached to catch Sun's hand with the other while Espio clung to Sun's back again just as the sea phylong hit the water. Alright, my turn. Vector dove into the water from the boat and gunned straight for the now underwater Grimm. Despite his enormous weight, Vector swam like a torpedo underwater, his tail being swung in a wave-like motion to propel himself at rapid speeds. The sea phylong noticed his presence and shot straight for Vector, the two clashing underwater. Charmy made it to the boat to set everyone down. They made it to the side to try and see what was going on but couldn't make out anything through the waves. Is he going to be okay? Blake questioned with worry. Vector will be fine, Espio assured with a smile. The water is his domain. Yeah, and he's the strongest guy out there. Charmy confirmed. Back underwater, Vector continued to wrestle with the sea phylong, gripping onto its face just as it opened its jaw. Though it briefly shook him off, Vector treaded in that same spot and allowed the sea phylong to shoot itself at him with an open jaw, but Vector caught it by the jaw, his hands and feet extended outward as he used his own strength to keep the jaw from closing. He quickly pulled his feet up and slammed them down with enough force to completely snap off its lower jaw. This did momentarily stop the large Grimm, allowing Vector a chance to see the hole in its throat that Charmy had made before. He shot himself straight at it with an open jaw. He bit down into the side of the hole and began to tear away at more of it, all while grabbing and holding on, even as the sea phylong shot itself up towards the surface to try and shake him off. Blake, Espio, Charmy, and Sun backed away somewhat from the enormous splash as they saw the flailing sea phylong. But Vector had dug his hands into the open wound, which was now significantly larger from his recent bite. From hell's heart, I stab at thee. Vector exclaimed as he wrenched his hands upward to completely rip off the sea phylong's head, something that made Blake's jaw drop and Sun's eyes to widen with sparkles and a wide smile. Espio grinned with a nod and closed eyes while Charmy cheered for him. Alright, way to go Vector. The bee cheered. The sea Phylong's corpse was already dissolving as it fell back into the water and began to sink. The people and crew on the boat all began to cheer with the captain nodding in relief as Vector climbed back aboard to regroup with his team and allies. A bit messier than I'd like, but I'll take it. He brushed his shoulders and smirked with crossed arms. When has one of our jobs ever been clean? Charmy joked, much to Vector's irritation. Ha, ha, he said sarcastically. And I believe Moby Dick was a whale, not a serpent. Espio said with a slight smile. Hey, beggars can't be choosers, am I right? Vector shrugged before looking towards the two faunus in front of him. So, you know Sonic, huh? I do. Blake nodded. And boy is that guy, awesome. Sun grinned. Heck yeah, he is. Charmy agreed as he and Sun shared a high five. Then I believe it may be best for us to compare notes. Espio proposed. Solitas. Weiss backflipped to avoid the extended stingers of two lancers before landing on her feet and erected a pair of glyphs above her while thrusting Myrtanaster to send a series of icicles forward. Though one lancer did get skewered, the other flew back to avoid it. Only to get caught in the psychokinetic grip of Silver the Hedgehog and slammed hard to the ground to squash it. He flew up to reach four lancers that were gunning straight for him, but before they could launch their harpoon-like stingers, Silver reached with his psychokinetic power to catch them easily and throw them to the ground, where Weiss was waiting as she plunged her sword into the ground, creating a series of glyphs where she predicted the lancers would be as an ice spike appeared on each glyph, and all 5 lancers were impaled and killed off quickly. Wow, those are some interesting powers you got. Silver smiled as he flew down closer to Weiss. Thank you, your ability is impressive too. Telekinesis? She asked. Psychokinesis. Silver corrected. Isn't that basically the same thing? She questioned. I guess, but my name for it sounds cooler. Silver said after a brief loss for words, which caused Weiss to snicker a bit. This power was almost exactly like the semblance belonging to Glinda Goodwitch, though she used her power with more precision and finesse. This Silver character seemed to be using it mostly for brute force. But based on her experience with hedgehogs, a part of her suspected that she'd only seen a glimpse of what this hedgehog was capable of. A flash of fire caught both their attention, as they turned to Tails and Blaze making quick work of the lancers surrounding them. The young fox had flown up to meet 4 lancers in the sky, slicing his right blade from Hurricane Gamma upwards to bisect one lancer while using the flat of the left sword to both block and slice the harpoon stinger attack from the second before quickly zooming in to cut that one in half. 2 were directly behind him and lunged straight for him, but Tails held both his blades outward and spun rapidly like a tornado to slice apart both lancers as they reached him. Blaze, however, is who Weiss focused on the most. She hopped and skipped, bouncing from one lancer to the next, all while spinning like a ballerina and generating a wheel of fire around her, all while the tips of her shoes were also set ablaze, burning up each lancer upon contact and landing gracefully on the ground after setting the 4th on fire. A 5th attempted to launch its harpoon stinger at her from behind, but she saw it coming and swiped her hand, which was now on fire, to completely sever the stinger from its cord, which she swiftly grabbed and set on fire with her palm before spinning around to throw the flaming stinger back at the lancer to pierce through and obliterate it with ease. Weiss couldn't take her eyes off Blaze for an instant. She moved with such speed that it seemed to rival Sonic, and yet it was with elegance and grace, so much so that she was honestly jealous. And her mastery over her apparent fire power was nothing to scoff at either. One look and Weiss could tell that Blaze knew exactly how to use it. While she still knew nothing of her personality-wise, speaking from a combative standpoint, Blaze was everything that Weiss wanted to be as a fighter. Heads up. Silver pulled Weiss out of the way with his psychokinesis, all to avoid the harpoon stingers of 3 more lancers. She shook her head and mentally scolded herself for being distracted and watched as Silver grabbed all 3 of the lancers with his powers, covering them in the cyan aura before he smashed them together and slammed them hard on the ground to finish them off. He then glanced up at the much larger lancer that hovered in the air with the remaining 6 protecting it. Weiss, you said that Big One is the queen, as in the alpha of this pack, right? Tails asked the heiress as all 4 regrouped. Yes, it's the same principle. She confirmed. And this one is clearly old enough to know to hang back and let its drones do the work. And have a number of others for extra protection it seems. Blaze commented. I assume that this queen should be our target. Yes. Weiss nodded. I could bring it down. Silver said. But those smaller ones might cause a bit of a headache. Then you focus on those, Silver. Tails told him. I'll cut the wings off the queen and bring her to the ground for you two to finish off. Sound like a plan. Works for me. Blaze nodded. We'll be waiting, Weiss said as well. Let's go, Silver. Tails stated as he and the psychokinetic hedgehog both flew straight up. Right behind you. The queen gave a command to the remaining drones, telling all 6 of them to intercept the 2 flying attackers. But Silver reached them first, picking up speed with his own powers to meet them halfway and allowing Tails to fly around and reach the queen, who launched spikes from its face towards the incoming Tails, but he slashed with his dual blades to block them before engaging in aerial combat. Silver delivered a punch, further enhanced by his psychokinesis, into the belly of one lancer to completely obliterate it, but soon found himself stuck in the middle of the remaining 5 as they all hovered around him. Well, looks like you got me. He raised his hands, feigning a surrender, just as the 5 lancers launched their harpoon stingers at him simultaneously. Or I got you. Silver smirked as he caught the incoming stingers with his psychokinesis, and by extension, the lancers themselves before pulling them all in and spinning them around at a rapid moving pace. This ended up slicking and skewering the lancers all by their claws, stingers, as well as smashing them against each other before he exploded outward to send their sliced up and splattered remains flying and crashing to the scattered ground to finish them off. The Queen Lancer flew backwards as Tails flew after it, before it launched its own, much larger, harpoon stinger at Tails, which he not only sliced with his blades, but even rode the organic tether while performing a spindish attack to quickly close the gap and spindish up its front, doing some damage to its outer armor before flying up and appearing directly behind it. Tails then quickly pressed the button on his left wing, causing a cartridge of cyan blue dust to pop from Hurricane Gamma's backpack form, which he caught with his energy blades. The round cracked and surged with icy blue energy in between the wing blades before Tails fired a cyan blue energy beam straight at the Queen Lancer's back, specifically in the area in between all of its wing joints. This caused a massive cluster of ice to spread across the Queen Lancer's back, covering its wings in ice and rendering them useless. Tails even flew in to slice and shatter the wings to make sure, sending it falling back towards the ground, where Weiss and Blaze were waiting. Here it comes, Weiss warned. Blaze pulled both her hands back and brought them close together, creating a small fireball in between them. But despite its small size, it was compact and building up with a great deal of heat and power. Once it felt close enough, Blaze thrusted her hands forward to send a condensed beam of pure fire and heat to completely destroy the lower and larger-most portion of its body. The head and its upper body flew directly over Weiss, who used a glyph to propel herself straight upward as she lunged Mertenaster forward, infusing it with wind dust to create a vortex-like effect around the blade and increase its cutting power, which not only pierced through its hide, but the whirlwind quickly expanded to further slice and blow apart the remains of the Queen Lancer from the inside before she landed gracefully on the ground, though she did fall a bit on her knees. Well done. Blaze smiled as she offered her hand. Weiss, was it? Yes. Weiss accepted her hand, though a feeling of awkwardness and giddiness swept through her a bit as she was now face to face with this master fire user who acted with such regularity. Thank you, Miss Blaze, she stuttered somewhat. Just Blaze will do. She chuckled. Of course. My apologies, ma'am. Weiss then realized what she just said. Ma'am. She put her hands on her face in embarrassment. Gods, is this how RWBY felt when she first met Sonic? At least RWBY had no shame at that time and acted like a giddy little schoolgirl practically on instinct, but Weiss could never see herself doing that. Though she did feel like that now that she was in the presence of this incredible warrior. Blaze looked towards Weiss with some partial amusement and sympathy. Poor girl was embarrassed. She probably became enamored by her combat style and wanted to put on a good impression, but she probably felt that she failed at that and only served in embarrassing herself. It was kinda cute, actually. Hey, is everyone okay? Silver asked as he and Tails flew down to meet them. We're just fine, thank you. Blaze assured. Thanks for your help. I'm really happy to see you guys, but what are you doing here? Tails asked the pair. Well, I was visiting Blaze in her home when she said she had felt a disturbance. Silver explained. Specifically, the will of the Sol Emeralds. Blaze corrected, catching Weiss' attention. Sol Emeralds. She looked in confusion. It's a bit complicated, so here's the short version. Tails began to explain. Weiss, Blaze is the princess from a dimension that is parallel to the one where Sonic and I come from. You already know about the Chaos Emeralds from our world. Well, Blaze's world has her own set of gems called the Sol Emeralds, similar but different from the Chaos Emeralds. And she is their guardian. Weiss was at a brief loss of words as her head was overloaded with questions. Another dimension that was different from Sonic's and her own. How many other dimensions are there? Not only that, but there is also another set of super-powered gemstones. And on top of all of that, this Blaze is a princess. A literal princess. No, you know what, I'm not even gonna question it at this point. Weiss stopped all train of thought in her head before her brain exploded. Blaze, Silver, welcome to Remnant. Tails told the pair. It's the name of this planet. Right now, it's currently under threat from Dr. Eggman, who's teamed up with a powerful sorceress in this world named Salem. I see. Blaze seemed to understand that simply enough. Is Sonic here? Yep, him, Shadow, and several of our other friends. Tails answered. But everyone's kinda scattered. I'll explain the details in just a bit, but we should call for a ride. Tails had already pulled out his scroll as he tried to call for help. Silver, if you could help haul out Cyclone. On it. Silver quickly moved towards where the Cyclone had crashed and began to use his powers to easily lift the damaged aircraft up from the snow and ice. So, what did the Sol Emeralds call you here for? Tails asked Blaze. The Sol Emeralds are not particularly chatty. But if they directed me here, it is for a purpose. The fiery princess answered. Perhaps Eggman and his alliance with this Salem individual may be worse than you may think. Well, we could certainly use the help if that's the case. Tails said seriously. However, unbeknownst to everyone, they were presently being watched from a nearby cliff on a tall mountain that oversaw the whole general area. A hooded figure stood at the top and observed everything that had taken place. After silently contemplating what they had just seen, the individual stepped backwards and out of sight, followed by a flash of orange light, leaving no trace of anyone there before. Back on the ocean, Blake and the Chaotix continued to ride the boat as Sun talked with some of the passengers while comparing notes to one another. So, to summarize, Vector began. We're in a world inhabited by people, half-animal people called faunus, who train as fighters to battle those grim monsters that are drawn in by negative emotions instead of hunting and gathering like normal animals. Among other things, like terrorists and dangerous madmen. Blake confirmed. Such as Eggman, who has allied with the White Fang, a faunus extremist militia. Espio said. Pretty much. Blake confirmed again. But Sonic totally went all gold and super in your last big battle and totally saved the day. Charmy flew around excitably. However, as per the usual usage of his super transformation, the Chaos Emeralds are now scattered across this world. So, you and friends of yours who allied with Sonic are now on a mission to gather the Chaos Emeralds before Eggman or any of his allies from this remnant world of yours can. Espio put in. Yeah, Blake nodded. And I'm tagging along too. Sun put his arm around Blake, which she quickly shoved off. What are you even doing here, Sun? She questioned, facing him. Tagging along. I literally just said that. Sun replied. You guys heard me, right? Yeah, we heard ya. Charmy confirmed. That's not what I meant. Have you been following me? Blake questioned. Since when? Sun looked away somewhat before answering. Well, after that huge fight at Beacon, I saw you and all your friends board a ship and leave the academy. I looked for you in Vale, but you weren't there. That is until you showed up there and got on this boat. So, you disguised yourself and stalked me. Blake questioned. If you wanted to help, you could have just asked. Sun's eyes widened in shock at that. Ask you, I kinda thought since you were usually the loner type. Blake smacked her forehead with a groan. Okay. Yeah, maybe I could have just asked. For real, kid. Vector added. That was kinda creepy. This coming from the giant crocodile who had probably the worst disguise ever. Sun snarked. Hey, it ain't easy to hide this humongous snout. Vector argued. Especially since nobody's seen people like us before. So, is it just you here, Sun? Blake asked. Where's the rest of your team? Sun scoffed humorously as he hopped onto the railing. No way I can get Neptune out on the ocean. He and the rest of the crew flew back to Mistral. I told them I'd catch up. Not the first time I left them to take a boat. Blake shook her head somewhat. So, what about the rest of you? She asked the Chaotix. If you're from Sonic's world, how'd you end up on Remnant? You got me. Vector shrugged. First we were at our office, waiting for our next potential client. Then there was this huge flash of light, and the next thing we know, our whole building got zapped in the middle of this ginormous city that none of us have ever seen before. Though we soon learned we ended up in the middle of downtown Vale. SBO added. And based on your story, we can only assume that Supersonic's use of chaos control is what brought us here. Sonic pulled us here, Charmy asked in confusion. Perhaps not intentionally. SBO thought. Sonic is not as experienced with chaos control as Shadow is. Nor was it used in such a powerful and precise manner, removing a continent's worth of those grim monsters. What happened, happened. We're here now, so let's try and make the most of it. Vector told his crew. So who exactly are you? Blake asked. Oh right, introductions. The crocodile began. The name's Vector, and these are my boys, Espio and Charmy. Hello. The chameleon nodded. Hi there. Charmy waved. Together, we're Team Chaotix. Vector continued. The best detectives anyone can ask for. You guys are detectives. Sun beamed with excitement, pushing Blake aside. Well, so am I. He put on a fake mustache and a pair of sunglasses. Detective Wukong reporting for duty. He crossed his arms and put on a tough cop persona. Charmy smiled with excitement at that, while Espio looked unimpressed as Vector helped Blake back up. So, if Sonic's looking for the Chaos Emeralds, we might as well tag along too. Blake, was it? Does seem a bit out of character for him to send you off on a mission like this all on your own. He didn't send me alone, I asked for it. Blake revealed. We're going to Menagerie, my home. It's small and my family lives there, and I'm familiar with the territory. And if I need his help, I can contact him via my scroll. So, you're scouting the location. Makes sense, I guess. Vector said. That, and I got some personal matters that I need to sort out. Blake looked away at that. We're also hoping to gather allies against Eggman, and, I'm hoping I can get my family on board too. Well, if you're looking for allies, count us in. Vector volunteered. We got experience fighting Eggman and looking for those fancy rocks. Plus, you saw us take out that giant grim sea monster, right? We can handle ourselves if a fight breaks out. Besides, we're kinda already on the boat. He said with a wince. Alright, Blake said, looking away somewhat, doing her best to hide a smile. Though she didn't know these guys all that well, she had the feeling they were at least sincere in their approach. She was more than prepared to tackle this part of her mission alone, but having some people around might not be so bad. Atlas Academy. General Ironwood took a sigh as sat down in his own personal office as he let this new information sink in. Tails and Weiss were directly attacked by Grimm on their way to Atlas. Though he was glad to know that they were all right, what he was most concerned about were that they were saved by two new individuals who also happened to be close allies of Sonic. How did they get here? Why were they here? Where were they when Eggman attacked Beacon? So many questions ran through his head, but hopefully he would get the answer once they arrived. Sir, everyone is here and right outside your office. Winter contacted him. Bring them in, he instructed. The door at the bottom of the stairs at the other end of his office opened up as Winter and Clover both stepped forward, and just behind them were Tails and Weiss, along with the two new individuals, right beside them. Ironwood immediately set his eyes on the silver-furred hedgehog, instantly thinking about the other two he had just met and their contradicting personalities, but above all else, their power. Sonic and Shadow are, without a doubt, the most powerful beings he'd ever met, but he wasn't exactly in their good graces when he had last spoke with them, Shadow in particular. He could only wonder just how powerful this new hedgehog was, and what kind of disposition he had. General. Weiss spoke professionally, though he could tell that she was not happy to see him. No doubt she was still angry over what he and the rest of Ozpin's group tried to do with her classmate. Miss Schnee, I heard what had happened. Are you okay? He asked as Winter and Clover both came by his side. I'm fine, thank you. She replied. And Tails? He asked the young fox. I'm okay, but my cyclone is heavily damaged and could use some repairs. Tails said. I'll have my finest mechanics get to work on repairing it. Ironwood offered. I appreciate it, but I'd like to be in charge of that. Tails said. No offense to any of you scientists, but nobody knows the cyclone better than me. That's perfectly fine. Ironwood accepted before turning to the two new arrivals. And you two would be. My name is Blaze, and this is Silver. The fiery princess introduced. Hello. Silver waved. We're friends of Sonic. First off, allow me to thank you for helping Tails and Weiss when they were attacked. Ironwood said. No problem, just happy to help. Silver said. As he said that, Blaze caught the gaze of Winter and saw a grateful expression in her eyes, followed by a nod, no doubt thankful for her aid in saving her younger sister, to which Blaze smiled and nodded back. But might I ask just how exactly you two came here? Ironwood asked. To answer that, I need to confirm something. You are familiar with the Chaos Emeralds from Sonic's world? Blaze asked. Yes, I am. Ironwood confirmed. Well, I actually hail from a world that is different from Sonic's. Blaze revealed, much to the surprise of Ironwood, Winter, and Clover. And in my world, we have similar gems known as Sol Emeralds. It is through them that Silver and I were able to travel here to Remnant. And these Sol Emeralds? Clover inquired. Where are they? Presently here. Blaze revealed as a ring of fire formed around her, and within that ring, were 7 colorful gemstones appeared. These stones were of identical color to the Chaos Emeralds, green, red, blue, white, purple, yellow, and cyan, but they were emerald-cut, square-shaped gem as opposed to the diamond cut of the Chaos Emeralds. Weiss looked in awe as she saw the Sol Emeralds herself, with Tails being particularly nervous. He supported the idea of telling General Ironwood about them, if only to avoid causing any further tension with more secret keeping, but at the same time, he remembered what happened when Eggman and Eggman Nega brought the Chaos and Sol Emeralds all together when they first met Blaze and feared something similar could happen on Remnant. The Ring of Fire then vanished as did the Sol Emeralds, leaving the General and his 2 subordinates more than a little surprised. I'm also aware of what happened recently in your world. Blaze continued. Dr. Eggman sided with a dangerous enemy of yours, leading to Sonic to transform with the Chaos Emeralds to beat them back. But as a result, the Chaos Emeralds are now scattered across your world. Sonic and his friends, new and old, are presently searching across all of Remnant for these gemstones. So, you know of Salem, then? Winter asked. That took Weiss and Tails by surprise. When they last heard, Winter wasn't a part of Ozpin's inner circle, unless you told her. Weiss looked toward the General. Her and the Ace Ops. Ironwood confirmed, gesturing to Clover next to him. As well as Professor Palendina. That also caught Tails' attention. With Ozpin gone, I needed my own team of people that I can trust, one that can help me in searching the continent of Solitas for any Chaos Emeralds that might be here. Well, did you find any? Silver asked. Not yet. Ironwood shook his head before looking towards the Cat Princess. Blaze, was it? If what I understand correctly, these Sol Emeralds you wield are the same as the Chaos Emeralds. Similar, but different. Blaze confirmed. For instance, Chaos Control is not a power they can use. And if you are wondering if I can use them against Salem and Eggman, then I will say right now that I would rather not. What? Ironwood looked in shock at that, with Winter and Clover being especially surprised. But if they have equal power to that of the Chaos Emeralds, they may indeed eliminate your enemy, but there is a cost to using them in a world outside their own. Blaze explained. They are tethered to my home dimension, so using them for their full power here on Remnant runs the risk of dragging my home into your own, essentially grinding 2 worlds together. Is your world at risk of getting dragged over to Remnant now with your gemstones being here? Winter asked. There is, but it's minimal, so long as I do not use the Sol Emeralds for anything else other than travel between my home and here. Blaze said. That being said, she looked to Tails in particular. If I have to return the Sol Emeralds to my dimension to avoid that happening, I will. But until then, I'll be holding onto them and will not use them for anything unless absolutely necessary. Tails seemed to nod in understanding before looking to Weiss as she seemed to get it all. They then looked to Ironwood, clearly seeing a disappointed expression on his face. No doubt he wanted to use the Sol Emeralds to get rid of Salem, but at the moment, all he gained was an additional ally or 2. But at this point, he needed all the help he can get. I suppose I'll have to accept it, then. The general said with reluctance, causing the tension to fade. How much of the situation do you know of? I know that you and a man named Ozpin, who has been cursed with reincarnation, are part of a secret society that is combating the sorceress and queen of the creatures of Grimm from the shadows. Blaze began. And that those creatures of Grimm are drawn in by negativity, which is why you feel it is essential to keep said conflict a secret, which I understand completely. Though I also know there was recent tension between you and Sonic regarding a female student making a rather difficult choice. And in my personal opinion, there are ways that could have been avoided, much simpler ways. Perhaps you are right, Ironwood admitted, but Sonic wouldn't get too hung up on the past. Tails said as he stepped closer to the general at his desk. We're here now and all in the same situation, so let's work together to make it through all this. He offered his hand to Ironwood. Though there was a minute of hesitation, a small smile appeared on Ironwood's face as he stood up from his desk to accept and shook Tails' hand. Very well. Since we're on the same team now, we have some questions that we need answered. Weiss began. Where's the Winter Maiden? And what's going on with Penny? Tails asked as well. I'd like to do what I can to help. We're also aware that you've captured one of Salem's associates and I would like to know what is going on in that regard as well. Blaze offered. Seriously, we'd like to help any way that we can. Silver added. Ironwood shared expressions with Winter and Clover before walking away from his desk to address them all. Follow me. The general and his two most trusted soldiers led Weiss, Tails, Silver, and Blaze deeper into the military base, specifically the research wing where they all saw uniformed scientists and researchers discussing and working on various projects. Though when the group passed by, several of the researchers stopped what they were doing, briefly finding themselves staring to the anthropomorphic trio. Blaze looked at all this somewhat questionably with a raised eyebrow but continued on following the others while Silver and Tails seemed a bit concerned by this. They know we're on the same side, right? Silver asked hopefully. They all know. Clover confirmed as they continued walking. But it's still an oddity to see. Even compared to the Faunus, you guys stand out quite a bit. I also imagine that another reason is that you, Silver, happen to look so much like the golden hero that all of Remnant is talking about. They think I look like Sonic. Silver questioned. There is a resemblance. Tails said. Not enough to confuse the two of you, but still enough to turn some heads. Well, he was gold at the time and usually blue, while my fur is silver. The hedgehog commented. Our colors are so different, that only an idiot would mistake us. He happened to hear a snort coming from Tails. What? Nothing, the yellow-furred fox replied, thinking back to that whole mess with Gun when they had first encountered Shadow and mistook Sonic for him. The group was soon led to a more secure area, with a pair of Atlesian soldiers guarding. The soldiers stood up straight in the presence of their general, who nodded to them as he slipped a keycard into a nearby terminal and inputted a few command keys before activating a rental scanner for his eyes, which finally allowed the door to open. Seems rather overkill. Weiss noted the intense level of security measures for that door as they walked inside. There is a sadistic and manipulative shapeshifter on the loose, one who has clearly allied himself with the enemy. Winter reminded. Right. Weiss grimaced, remembering said shapeshifter and the emotional turmoil he put her and all her friends through. As they descended down a flight of stairs and began to walk down one hallway, the visitors immediately noticed the complete lack of any human presence. Researchers, even soldiers, with the only guards being several Atlesian knights that stood up straight alongside the walls, as well as the many cameras along the ceiling. The group came to one door in particular as Ironwood inputted a few command keys on the terminal next to that door and allowed it to unlock and open, revealing a high-tech laboratory with only a select few people in it, one being Pietro Polendina, who was working at a console, the other being Ciel Soleil, who stood guard in front of a pod-like device. Where the disremembered parts of an android girl were all being connected to each other via wires and cables, as well as a tube connected to the back of her head that led up to the ceiling. Penny, Weiss muttered. Professor Polendina. Tails called, bringing the professor out from his work, who looked to the source of the voice and smiled warmly. Oh my, Tails. He laughed as the young fox flew over to him and they shook hands. It's so good to see you again. I wasn't sure if I ever would. Good to see you too, Professor. Tails smiled as the man in the cybernetic wheelchair turned to the other visitors. "Oh, Miss Schnee," he greeted fondly, to which Weiss smiled and nodded. "And, it seems we have other visitors. Professor, this is Blaze and Silver, good friends of mine." Tails introduced. "Silver, Blaze, this is Professor Pietro Polendina. A pleasure to meet you." Blaze shook his hand first, followed by Silver, and once he did, he also saw the female soldier standing next to the android girl. "Nice to meet you." He offered her his hand, she just looked at it before standing up straight to introduce herself. "Ciel Soleil," she said in a professional manner, much to Silver's confusion. "Don't mind her." Pietro chuckled slightly. "She's on guard duty and treats her assignment very seriously." Tails smiled before looking to the dismembered android as his own smile faded. "How's Penny?" Pietro's own smile faded too before he answered. "Her central core, her memory unit, all her vitals remain undamaged. But the rest of her systems, or another manner." Pietro went to his lab station, with everyone else following him before pressing a series of commands to bring up some footage from Penny's recorded point of view, specifically her battling against a familiar and red-eyed machine. "Metal Sonic," Tails said, uneasy with even Weiss looking somewhat nervous, with her eyes also setting on the footage of metal-wielding Crescent Rose, the weapon built and treasured by her partner. "This is a memory file copied from Penny during the battle at Beacon." Pietro explained. "This machine knew exactly what it was doing. It disarmed her and then cleanly cut all her limbs as to not damage any vitals. No doubt this machine's maker wanted Penny alive for study. Which is why Pietro's laboratory is now under constant guard." Ironwood said. "Eggman more than likely knows about Penny, which puts a target on her back." "I see," Blaze seemed to understand that much at least. Repairing Penny alone is a simple task, but with such a dangerous madman on the loose, one who is capable of making machines like that, he gestured to the footage of Metal Sonic again. "You would want her better equipped and prepared." Weiss understood. "Yes," Pietro confirmed. "I'd like to help with that." Tails volunteered. "I've got experience studying Eggman's tech, so I'd say I know a thing or two about to counter it. I already got a whole list of upgrade ideas that I'd like to share with you, Professor, if that's all right with you, of course." Pietro smiled to the young fox. "Tails, my boy, I would love your assistance." He smiled genuinely, causing Tails to smile. "And I might seriously need it. I've studied Eggman's technology and I cannot make heads or tails of it." "I hear ya." Tails chuckled. "His tech is notoriously weird. Oh, by the way, do you still have those blueprint designs I gave you? About that gravity dust generator we could use to mass produce more artificial dust like that plasma dust we talked about?" "I have, and I've already set the designs to the team to begin construction. I even have what we already made in storage, perhaps we could use them as base for more ideas." Pietro volunteered. "I'm looking forward to it." Tails went on. "Ahem." Ironwood coughed somewhat, getting their attention. "I apologize for interrupting, and I will certainly be looking forward to any developments in your projects, be it Penny or the artificial dust as you described, but you also inquired about a certain prisoner." He looked to Pietro at that, who looked very serious as he knew who he was talking about. Without another word, Pietro moved his mechanic wheelchair away from his desk and towards a secure vault door on the other side of his laboratory. After inputting all the necessary command keys on a terminal, the vault door opened and allowed everyone entrance. It appeared to be a medical room of sorts with 2 levels. All of them were currently on the upper floor with a bulletproof glass wall separating them from the larger and lower floor, where a pair of doctors worked on a certain patient as a pair of Atlesian knights remained on guard. Tails and Weiss both gasped somewhat at what, or rather who, they saw, with Silver looking surprised himself as Blaze narrowed her own eyes. It was Cinder, the would-be assassin and chosen vessel for the maiden powers, now laid in a hospital bed, hooked up to several monitors and machines. Both her arms were gone up to the shoulders, with medical patches keeping them sealed. Her face was black and swollen as an oxygen mask covered her whole mouth and a medical patch over the socket of where her left eye would be. Is that?" Weiss stuttered. "Cinder fall," Ironwood confirmed. "Yeesh, what happened to her?" Silver winced. "Shadow happened," Tails answered, which only caused Silver to shiver somewhat. "What's her condition?" he asked. "She is missing both her arms along with her left eye, obviously." Pietro began. Her vertebrae is completely shattered, and nearly all the bones in her legs are broken. There's also a significant amount of damage done to her internal organs. All that damage has put her into a coma, and we have no idea when, or even if, she'll wake up. And even if she does, she is going to be crippled the rest of her life, unable to so much as feel anything below her neck. It's a miracle she's even alive. It's no miracle. Tails countered. Shadow wanted her alive. Believe me, if he intended to kill her, he would have done it. Without any mistakes. That caused Silver, Pietro, and even Clover to shiver somewhat, with Ironwood and Winter looking nervous themselves. Winter in particular remembered her sparring match against Shadow, as well as Kiro. Honestly, if Shadow was capable of doing this to someone who had the powers of a maiden, then even if she and Kiro did work together during that match, they still would have lost. She was most fortunate that they were allies. All the good his so-called restraint did. Ironwood commented. The only reason I'm keeping her alive right now is because of any potential intel to gain from Salem, but if she can't wake up. Silver, could your powers do anything since they're mind-related? Weiss asked. I can only move stuff with my mind, I'm not a telepath. Silver answered. Perhaps cybernetics, then. Blaze proposed. We are looking to go that route right now. Pietro replied. But we need to be careful as to not permanently damage her brain, arguably the only organ in her body that isn't damaged. Again, I can probably help with that. Tails asked. If you could, I would certainly appreciate that. Ironwood said gratefully. And now, for the Winter Maiden. With Pietro choosing to stay behind in his laboratory and continue working on Penny with Seal by his side, Ironwood, Winter, and Clover had led Weiss, Blaze, Tails, and Silver to another secure room, one that had a similar design to the one they were previously in. Currently, they resided in an upper floor of a two-room chamber, with a glass wall once again separating them from the larger lower chamber. While this room did have medical equipment, it didn't appear guarded and even had the furnishings of a home, such as cupboards and drawers, a sink, and there were even various paintings on the wall. But what stood out was the sight of a hospital bed, and an elderly woman who appeared to be sleeping. She was attached to monitors that showed her heart rate, indicating that she was still alive. Silver and Blaze looked confused, before Tails and Weiss both realized what this was. Is that the current Winter Maiden? Tails asked. Yes, Freya, Ironwood confirmed, and as you can see, she's not long for this world. How long? Blaze asked. Probably a year at the most. Ironwood answered. Obviously, she is no condition to join the battle against Salem and Eggman. Which is why a potential replacement is currently being disguised. He said, upon looking towards Winter, who looked away with a complicated expression. Weiss was the first to realize what the general was implying. You want to make my sister the next Winter Maiden. This won't be like what we tried to do with Pyrrha. Ironwood quickly said. There is no aura transfer machine involved, so the succeeding maiden will only inherit the power naturally just like every other maiden before. But to volunteer Winter, Weiss was already getting angry. He didn't volunteer me, Weiss. He offered me the choice, even told me I was free to decline. Winter said, still looking away. And I haven't even made my choice yet. She was offered it only yesterday. Clover added. And if she says, no, both Harriet and Elm volunteered to take her place, of their own accord. What about her family? Silver asked. Any daughters or granddaughters? Freya never had children. Ironwood shook his head. She couldn't. We were informed that these maidens had to live in isolation for their own protection. I assume that's the reason. Blaze commented, looking seriously towards Freya's frail form before her expression softened. This woman clearly didn't have much long to live and pitied her for the end of her life soon. At first, yes, that was Ozpin's intent, Ironwood said and noticed the glare from Weiss, which he couldn't fault her for. But that won't be the case here. Whether it be Winter or someone else, the next Winter Maiden will not go into hiding as before. She will join the war effort. If we can find the Chaos Emeralds and deliver them to Sonic, we can finally rid our world of Salem and the Grimm forever. There will be no further reasons for the maidens to hide anymore, and they can live whatever life they chose. He spoke that last part specifically to Winter, who seemed somewhat conflicted. And as I've said before, it is only a choice, Winter. I won't force you if you say no. I'm aware. Thank you, sir. Winter nodded. Hey Sorry if this sounds insensitive, but why not just make her into a cyborg if you're considering doing something similar to Cinder? Silver asked. With the way Freya's body is, she won't be able to handle that kind of stress. Tails already knew the answer. Exactly. Ironwood confirmed. But while this decision remains on hold, our priority must now shift to locating any Chaos Emeralds that may have ended up on Solitas. And I need all the help I can get, right now. He looked towards Tails, Silver, and Blaze with a humble and pleading expression. Please. Of course, we're going to help, General. Blaze said firmly. We already said that we would. Yeah, we've done emerald hunts before, this isn't anything new. Silver smirked. Ironwood let out a sigh of relief. Thank you. On that note, there is something else I need to share with you. Weiss said, getting Ironwood's attention, along with her sister and Clover. Someone under Eggman has infiltrated the Schnee Dust Company, so I'm going to infiltrate it myself to find the culprit. Weiss. Winter looked like she was about to protest. I'm the only one who can winter, and you know it. Weiss interrupted. As the heiress, I have near unrestricted access to the entire company, and I can do it without suspicion. That's not my only concern, Winter said with worry. You're worried about father? Weiss asked rhetorically. So, what kind of guy is Weiss, Dad like? Silver asked Tails. Just curious. I never met him, but from what I hear, he's not a good man. The two-tailed fox answered. That is a gross understatement. Ironwood said with a scowl. Jacque Schnee is a greedy and immoral man who is willing to stoop very low to get what he wants. He has absolutely no shame whatsoever. Would that include something like treason? Blaze asked. No. Clover quickly said. Jacque is a terrible man, but he's loyal to Atlas, or at least he values the kingdom's monetary status. Eggman and Salem would probably see Atlas destroyed and that would cost him nearly all his fortune, and he wouldn't sacrifice a dime. Yeesh. I haven't even met him, but I already hate him. Silver groaned while Blaze looked with a scowl herself. Father may not be a traitor, but he's not above harming others to get what he wants. Winter said. And we have no idea who this infiltrator is, or what they're capable of. And it might not even be a single person, it could be several. Which is why I have Sonic, Tails, and you as an emergency contact if something bad happens. Weiss said. I can handle myself in a fight, but more importantly, I'm capable of asking for help if I need it. I promise, I'll be careful and be smart about this. But I have to do this. I think she can do it. Tails quickly said, specifically to Winter. I've seen what Weiss can do, so I'm sure she's got this. And like she said, she'll call us if she needs help. Winter understood all that, and she was grateful that her sister had people to rely on in case of an emergency, but the last thing she wanted was for her younger sister to go back to that horrible excuse for a home. Back into his clutches. But, she could tell by the look in Weiss' eyes, that she was dead set on doing this and would not have her mind changed. Promise me, that you will call if you need it. Winter said, putting a hand on Weiss' shoulder. Weiss smiled back as she wrapped her arms around her older sister. I promise. This was enough for Winter to smile back and embrace her sister, which caused everyone, and even Ironwood, to smile. The boat horn sounded off as the ship reached its destination, the island nation of Menagerie. The port was filled to the brim with faunas of all shapes and sizes, along with several stands and markets selling fish and other similar products. Looking out past the dock, one could see several small buildings that decorated nearly every corner of the general area. As soon as the ship reached port, and the bridge was drawn, all the Faunus passengers began to step out, which included Blake and Sun, as well as the Chaotix. The detective trio and Monkey Faunus looked around with Sun and Charmy being the most excitable. Wow, look at all these people. Charmy flew all around the area. Charmy, stay close. Vector told the bee. Don't go wandering off. I've never seen so many Faunus in one place. Sun looked around in amazement. This is the one place in all of Remnant where everyone can feel safe, no matter who or what they are. Blake said as they made their way through the port's market. Safe and crowded. Vector commented as he tried to squeeze in between several people moving back and forth. Excuse me, sorry. It's rather busy today, isn't it? Espio observed. It's like that every day, here. Blake said, looking away somewhat. Come on, She led them away from the port and the market and deeper into the island. But even then, it still seemed incredibly crowded, from all the people to the small buildings and various palm trees. The only open space was the road that allowed people to traverse, but there were no vehicles in this place, not even a simple bicycle. Charmy tried to get a bit more space by flying up and above his friends, which gave him a bird's-eye view of the general area. There are so many people here. I wonder why. His thoughts were interrupted as he accidentally flew into a laundry line that was connecting between two buildings, with a towel being tangled up in his face. Ah, I can't see. Charmy flew around in a panic, only to get pulled down by his leg by Vector, who took the towel off his face. That's why I said stick close, he told the young bee. Sorry, Vector. Charmy apologized. Seriously, is it always so cramped here? Sun complained as they tried to navigate through a sea of people. Well, when you try to take an entire species and put them on an island that's 2/3 desert, then yeah. It tends to be cramped. Blake said with bitterness clearly evident in her voice. What? You guys have that much more space. Sun went up ahead in front of Blake. Why waste it? A little desert never hurt anyone. It's not like the desert in Vacuo, Sun. She told him. The wildlife and Grim out there are more dangerous than the rest of the regions. Unfortunate, but we may have to familiarize ourselves with said desert, if in the event a Chaos Emerald may have ended up here. Espio put in. Yeah, I know. Blake grimaced as she was not looking forward to going into those island deserts, even if she had to. Why exactly is everyone living on this island again? Charmy asked. I told you all on the boat, humans and Faunus don't always get along. Blake explained. Faunus have been feared and hated for generations. We've tried to help people, we even helped in the Great War, the biggest conflict of our planet. We were promised equal rights, but all we got was this small island. So, they promised a better future, but just scammed you with this tiny island if only to shut you up. Vector summed up. Pretty much. Blake confirmed. Jerks. Sun grimaced. Yeah, that's so mean. Charmy complained too. Why would they do that? That's just how some people are here. Blake looked down as they continued down their path, walking up a flight of stairs that led to the top of a hill. We've tried to make the best of things. They made it to the top of the hill, which gave them a rather large view of a settlement that looked reasonably peaceful. Whoa, Sun and Charmy looked around in awe while Vector and Espio just observed the area. This is Kuana, the largest settlement on the island. Blake told them. It looks really nice here. Charmy smiled. Looks can be deceiving. Espio commented with seriousness before looking towards Blake. You clearly made the best here, but it's not enough, is it? No, it's not. Blake crossed her arms, looking down in grief and frustration. We asked to be equals, but this island, this whole place, it's a constant reminder that we're not. And we probably never will. A large hand was placed on her back, getting her attention as she looked to a smirking crocodile. I wouldn't be so sure. The Faunus might have a new hero to look up to. See for yourself. He gestured to one building, causing Blake to look in surprise as she saw a bunch of Faunus children with spray paint, making a picture of Supersonic. The golden hero is so cool. One dear boy said. He's amazing. A rabbit girl agreed. I wanna be just like him when I grow up. An elephant boy said. Hey, you guys think he's a Faunus like us? He looks like one. A wolf girl asked. Maybe he's the god of animals who came to save us. The rabbit girl guessed. Well, I hope he comes here. I really wanna meet him. The deer boy said. Hey, let's play, Golden Hero versus the Grim, again. I'll be the golden hero this time. The elephant boy said excitably as he chased after his friends, all of whom were laughing as they ran down the street. Blake was partially surprised by this before she found herself smiling. Maybe there is hope. If Sonic can get the Chaos Emeralds again and rid their world free of the Grim, things could change, but it wasn't going to happen overnight. They had to work to make that happen, and she was going to do her part, starting right now. Alright, time to go home. Oh yeah, which one's yours? Sun asked as he pulled Blake in by the shoulder. Can you see it from here? Kind of, Blake winced. Is that one? Charmy pointed to a small house on the side. What about that tiny one over there? Sun pointed to another one on the other side of the street. Blake winced uncomfortably. It's actually the big one on the bottom of the hill, isn't it? Espio assumed knowingly, gesturing to the rather large building at the end of the street. Yep, Blake confirmed shyly, causing Sun and Charmy's eyes to widen like saucers. Taking a wild guess here, but your family more or less run this island, right? Vector guessed with a knowing smirk. My father's the chieftain of Menagerie, yes. Blake hung her head down. Sun's jaw just dropped while Charmy flew up excitedly to her face. So, you're like the princess of this island. I'd rather not think of it like that. Blake backed away somewhat, with Vector pulling Charmy away. Well, let's go meet your folks. The group of 5 made it to the rather large home, which essentially seemed like a mansion compared to the rest of the homes they've seen so far. It had several floors to it, a stone staircase that led up to the large front doors with large knockers on each door. Blake reached for one but hesitated for a second. What's wrong? Sun asked. The last time I spoke with my parents, it didn't end on the best of terms, Blake admitted with shame. Well, here's your chance to make it up with them. Charmy encouraged. Blake sighed as she grabbed the knocker and gave only a single knock, which echoed throughout the whole house, alerting the visitors. No offense Blake, but that's not exactly welcoming. Vector commented. None taken, she replied. The door soon opened, revealing an older cat faunus woman with black hair that looked very much like the girl at the door. The second she saw her, her eyes widened with shock and emotion. Blake. Hi, Mom, she gave a nervous wave and wincing smile. Without another word, Callie came up to her daughter and wrapped her arms around her tightly. My baby girl. Blake's own surprise soon gave way to pure emotion and relief as she returned her mother's embrace with a teary-eyed smile. Callie. Who is it? Someone asked from inside. The man was a male panther faunus who had a large muscular build with black hair, a thick beard, and yellow eyes. He soon saw who his wife greeted at the door, with his own eyes turning circular as his face almost lost all its color. Blake. Dad, she stepped into her home for the first time in a while and couldn't even look him in the eyes. What I said to you she couldn't even find the words before running up to her father and wrapping her own arms around him, much to his shock, even as she buried her face into his chest. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. Gira embraced his daughter back, as tears built up in his own eyes. He found himself looking towards his wife, who smiled emotionally too. But looking just past her, and Gira found himself looking towards the Chaotix, their appearance taking him by surprise. Nice to meet ya, sir. Vector greeted, walking into the building. I know we kinda look a little odd. It's okay, Dad, Blake pulled away, wiping the tears from her eyes. They're friends, so much has happened and, I've got so much I need to tell you. Atlas. After receiving a ride from a military transport, Weiss arrived at the entranceway of her enormous mansion. Stepping out of the transport, it drove back down the enormous driveway, moving past the 3 enormous pillars that kept up the Schnee family crest and leaving Weiss alone as she looked up at the doorway. Being back here again felt colder than it did before, probably because being at Beacon, surrounded by all the friends she had made. But now, she was all alone, and back here. But she was here for a job, a mission that she had to do for the sake of her friends and the world, and she would see it done. Here we go, she muttered to herself before ringing the doorbell and waited for whichever servant would be there to greet her. After a couple minutes, the door opened to someone that Weiss recognized immediately, and was actually happy to see. Miss Schnee. A short, slightly heavy-built, and balding man greeted. Klein. Weiss smiled as she entered the main hall of her manor before hugging him, which he immediately returned. Oh my, this is sudden, Klein commented as his eyes turned pink. Sorry, Weiss pulled away, but still kept up her smile. A lot has happened and, I'm happy to see you. Klein smiled as his eyes turned yellow. And I'm happy to see you too, my little snowflake. He said, putting a hand on her shoulder. Weiss. Looking towards the side, the heiress was surprised to see her mother, Willow Schnee, stepping out with a surprised expression. But Weiss was even more surprised to see there wasn't a glass of wine in her hand. Mother, Weiss wasn't quite sure what to expect from her. You're okay, Willow slowly walked up to her, making sure that she was actually seeing her daughter and not hallucinating from all the alcohol. Yes, I'm fine, why wouldn't I be? Weiss questioned. Klein sneezed loudly, his eyes turning blue. Pardon me, Miss Schnee. But Willow saw what had occurred at Beacon recently. He sneezed again. And she was dreadfully worried about you, I was too. He sneezed yet again. Weiss turned to her mother in surprise. You were worried about me. Yes, Willow looked away with a sense of awkwardness filling the room and her being. But, I'm glad you're okay. Weiss had felt that same kind of awkwardness her mother was no doubt feeling, but there was some joy to know that her mother was genuinely worried for her safety and relieved that she was okay. Thank you, mother. Well, she wasn't the only one. A voice came up from the top of the stairs, leading Weiss to see her younger brother standing at the top as he stepped down. Pretty much all of Remnant saw what happened at Beacon, so safe to say, things got pretty tense up here. Whitley. Weiss greeted somewhat coldly. There didn't seem to be any kind of relief or happiness in his voice, just the same kind of condescending attitude from their father. But while I am pleased to see you back here too, I'm surprised. Whitley said as he was at the same level as them. I was under the impression that you never wanted to come back home. She did pick up a bit of spite in his voice when she heard that. I have some personal matters to attend to here, she said in a straightforward manner. Oh, well, if that's the case, I'd love to help. He offered with a seemingly sincere smile. I appreciate that, but I can manage. Weiss declined. Excuse me, Miss Schnee. A maid had stepped onto the scene, holding a folded-up dress in her hands. Yes, both Weiss and Willow said at the same time, before looking awkward at just that. The younger Miss Schnee. The maid addressed Weiss, who stepped forward to greet the maid. Your father has asked to speak with you in his study. But before you meet with him, he would ask that you get cleaned up and dress in something he describes as more fitting. She offered the dress to Weiss. Ahem. Klein coughed loudly as his eyes turned red. I think Jacque can afford to wait. Young Miss Schnee only just returned home. I think she needs some time before. It's okay, Klein. Weiss raised her hand to him. To be honest, I have some things I'd like to talk with him about myself. Weiss. Willow looked in surprise. Was her daughter actually hoping to see Jacque? It couldn't be to have a heartwarming reunion with him. So, for what reason would she want to see him? Oh, you're wanting to see father. Whitley looked to his older sister in a teasing and somewhat mischievous manner. What brought this on? A personal matter that I need to settle. Weiss said as she took the dress from the maid's hands. Thank you, she told the maid, who bowed with a smile as she backed away before looking at the dress in her hands. So, he sends a servant to greet me and asks that I doll up before even seeing him. She mused internally. Glad to see that he hasn't changed. Menagerie, Belladonna residence. Blake and her parents, along with the Chaotix and son all sat together in the dining hall, with Callie providing tea from everyone as Blake explained the entire situation to them all. All the details she had yet to tell Sun and the Chaotix, such as the existence of Salem and magic, Dr. Eggman's origins, in which the Chaotix helped to explain, as well as the maidens and the relics hidden underneath the four Huntsman academies, and Ozpin's curse of reincarnation. It was a moment of silence as her parents hadn't so much as said a word during the whole exposition, much to the concern of their daughter. Mom, Dad, are you still with me? Yes, sweetie. Callie stuttered somewhat. It's just a lot to take in, them being from a whole another world aside, she briefly gestured to the Chaotix. The Grimm having a master, a Grimm person that wants to destroy everything, magic, maidens, ancient relics, and Ozpin being some kind of reincarnated warrior. I've met the man more than a few times, Gira added. I always sensed that he was keeping some things secret, but I never imagined it was anything like that. Though I can understand why such things have to be kept secret. Such revelations would cause mass panic, Espio said seriously, which in turn, would lead to a surge in those creatures of Grimm, which are drawn to negativity like moths to a flame. It all sounds really spooky. Charmy buzzed. Kinda wish we were here at the start of this. Vector said with a slight smirk. Would have loved to solve the mystery our way. Why does Sonic get his own detective work? That's our gig, he joked. And why wasn't I included in all this? Sun asked Blake. I'm a detective too. Beacon was infiltrated, Sonic and the others had their own plan, and we didn't want any info being leaked to Cinder or her team that could tip her off. Blake answered. You three seem to be taking all this information quite well. Gira observed the Chaotix. Meh, this is nothing new. We deal with stuff like this all the time, Vector waved off. You deal with genocidal monsters all the time. Gira exclaimed in surprise. We've gone up against alien invasion, mechanical monstrosities, interdimensional threats, and the occasional deity. Espio listed off casually, yes, this isn't all that new. Yeah, and we've kicked all their butts. Charmy flew up in the air and pumped his fist with excitement. Gira and Callie stared at the Chaotix with blank expressions before the latter looked to her daughter. You've made some interesting friends, Blake. The Faunus girl smiled with how true that was before getting serious. And that's one of the reasons we're here. Pretty sure you two have heard about the Golden Hero. Are you kidding? Who hasn't? Gira exclaimed. The whole world is talking about that. Some people here are even talking about how it is the god of animals coming down to save us all. Well, I've met him. Blake revealed, much to Gira and Callie's surprise. He's no god, trust me. But, he may really be the one to save us all. She took out her scroll and pulled up a picture of the blue hedgehog himself and handed it to her parents to show them. His name is Sonic, he's from the same world as all of them. He's the one who saved Beacon when Dr. Eggman and the White Fang attacked. Not only that, he wiped out all of the Grimm from the entire eastern half of Sanus. That caused her parents to look in even further shock. It's true. The Grimm in that entire region are gone, including the pools they all emerged from. Vale, and a bit beyond, are Grimm-free. How is that even possible? Gira stuttered in disbelief. He used these. Blake took her scroll back and pulled up another picture, this one being of 7 colored gemstones. They're called Chaos Emeralds, gems of incredible power from Sonic's world. With all 7, he can transform into that golden form that you all saw. He's known as Super Sonic in that state, and he is essentially capable of anything. Espio added. Super Sonic, huh? Sun said aloud. Catchy, but kinda lame. Lame. Charmy went right up into Sun's face. How can you say that? Super Sonic is awesome. Oh, definitely. He's really awesome. Sun quickly said, raising his hands up. I meant the name is lame. He noticed the looks everyone was giving him with Gira and Callie looking to him in surprise, while Blake, Espio, and Vector were unamused. What? I mean, Super Sonic. Don't you think that sounds a bit cliché? Well, since you're the expert on cool names, what would you call him? Charmy crossed his arms. The Golden Hero does have a nice ring to it. Sun began. How about, the Gold? Or, Golden Boy, Light Storm, Lightspeed. Oh, that's a good one. Lightspeed Sonic. Nah, Super Sonic is better. Charmy dismissed. Oh, really? Bet you he would disagree if he heard me say all that. Sun argued. Ahem. Vector coughed loudly to bring the argument to an end before turning to Gira and Callie again. So, yeah, whenever Sonic gets the emeralds, he transforms and becomes near unstoppable. But the problem is, Super Sonic is temporary. And when his form wears off, the Chaos Emeralds end up scattered all over the world. Or in this case, your world. And you believe one such emerald is here on Menagerie. Gira figured out. It is a possibility. Espio confirmed. And that's why I'm here. Blake said to her parents. Salem and Eggman are looking for these emeralds too, and if they find them before we do, I don't even want to think what that would mean. But if we find them first and get them to Sonic, he could wipe out all of the Grimm from Remnant forever. Stop Salem and Eggman permanently, something that Ozpin hasn't been able to for centuries. And we're not just looking for the emeralds, she looked directly at her father. Dad, I know I only just got home, and I know you don't like to fight, but you haven't seen what these people are capable of, and what they're willing to do to get what they want. We need all the allies we can get. Sonic, and all my friends, they're all across Remnant right now looking for the emeralds and trying to bring enough people together so that we can stop them. They're even trying to find Sienna Khan to get her on our side. We need your help. Please, Dad, she bowed her head, begging him. I can't do this without you. Gira was completely stunned to say the least. All this information aside, the fact that his daughter was begging him for help is what really caught him off guard. She seemed so desperate, and he'd never seen her like this before. Even when it came to their disagreement about fighting back against Faunus discrimination, Blake never begged. But she was now. He and his wife shared expressions as they were still processing all of this new information being more or less dumped on them. But Callie was the first to nod with a serious expression, an expression that he knew all too well. Their daughter needed their help, and that's what she'll get. All right. Blake looked up with a slight gasp, her father smiling towards her. This is clearly a lot to take in, but if any of it is true, then what happens next may impact our whole world, faunus and human. I know I can't stop you from getting involved in any of this, you know I've tried. Even if I said no, you would still jump in without hesitating. So, if I can't stop you, then I'll be by your side the whole time. He put a hand on his daughter's shoulder and smiled lovingly towards him. I promise Blake, you and all your friends have my support. Blake honestly couldn't believe it. Just like that, her dad was on board. A part of her was expecting another big argument like before, and just like he said, if he refused to join, she'd still jump in. But now, without any sort of argument, he openly stated his willingness to jump in with her. She found herself smiling with emotions as she leaned into his arm, purring the whole time. Thanks, Dad. Callie smiled lovingly as she saw her husband and daughter reconnect, with Sun and the Chaotix smiling as well before she turned to them. Thank you all, for helping my daughter. You're welcome. Charmy beamed. Of course. Espio nodded. Anytime. Vector gave a finger salute. And you raised one heck of a daughter. Sun grinned. Callie smiled before looking to said daughter. Blake, by any chance, is this young man your boyfriend? Blake stiffened at that, while Gira looked questionable at that. Ooh. Blake and Sun, sitting in a tree. Kissing. Charmy sung and made kissy noises. Oh, no, we're not a thing. Sun said with a slight laugh. I mean, she's cool. Blake's awesome, but we're not dating. Though he did stalk me before. Blake put in, causing Sun to stiffen like a statue. What? Gira questioned. Twice, in fact. Blake listed off, a slight grin forming on her face as she noticed Sun sweating up a storm. The first being during my time at Beacon, even trespassing onto school grounds to do so. Blake, Sun tried, his voice becoming weak as a dark and comedic shadow formed around Gira before gazing with blood-red eyes at the young man. The second was on my way home. Blake continued, her smirk still present. He even disguised himself so that I wouldn't recognize him. Hey, Sun tried as Gira's shadow only grew. And he's also a known thief who would steal food for me, often breaking the law without a second thought. Blake finished off. I mean that's, okay, a lot of that's true, but, Sun stuttered. I got some standards, I mean I'm not some kind of creeper or anything, He soon found himself cowering over Gira, who stood up from his spot and stood directly over the frightened Wukong, a dark and menacing aura radiating from him. Wanting desperately to avoid getting mauled, Sun quickly poured himself more tea from the pot, which he had picked up with his monkey tail. This tea is really good. He eyed the Chaotix. Help me out here, he muttered. Nope. Charmy was a bit scared by Gira's presence right now himself. You should take responsibility for your actions. Espio said seriously. Yeah, I'm not getting involved in this. Sorry. Vector said humorously, much to Sun's terror. Blake giggled slightly herself as she let all this play out. Callie looked to her daughter in slight surprise. Did she just hear her little girl giggle? She had also noticed the mischievous smirk on her face. Was this really her daughter? She had never seen this side of her before. Did she pick up any of it while she was away? Callie found herself smiling. Blake seemed so much more outgoing than before. Though many bad things clearly happened to her recently, there was clearly a lot of good happening in Blake's life that had just as big an impact as any. Maybe Blake leaving was probably good for her after all. A loud knock echoed throughout the house, getting all of their attention. Oh, perfect timing. Gira commented, his dark aura vanishing, much to Sun's relief. Dad, Blake asked, you said your friends were looking to get into contact with Sienna. Well, I've actually scheduled a meeting today. Gira revealed, much to Blake and her friend's surprise. Sienna is here? Blake questioned. No, but representatives of the White Fang who have been in contact with her reached out to meet and speak with me, and today's the day. Gira said as he stood up. If we can reach out to her, and you speak with her directly, maybe we can bring her in sooner than you thought. Wait a sec, Vector stood up, stopping him. I though the White Fang sided with Eggman. The Vale Branch and Adams group, yeah. Blake confirmed. But I know Sienna, and she would never side with a maniac like Eggman. Perhaps, but how do you know the Vale branch was the only cell he recruited? Espio questioned. Even if this Sienna wouldn't side with Eggman, can you be sure the same could be said for anyone else under her command? You believe there might be spies in her cell? Gira asked seriously. I would be a fool to at least dismiss the idea. Espio replied. But spies aren't Eggman's thing, right? Charmy questioned. He's more the type to go all, oh, I'm gonna conquer the world and everything. And then go all boom. Big explosions. He waved his arms around for emphasis. For Eggman maybe, but that Salem lady might be another story. Vector put in as he contemplated. So, what should we do then? Callie asked. Vector thought for a moment, gazing around him before setting his eyes on Blake. You used to be part of the White Fang, but you quit, right? Right. Blake confirmed, not quite sure where he was going with this. So, all the crazy fanatics probably think you're a traitor to their cause, right? Vector asked. Yeah, they think that. Blake said with a low growl. A smile formed on Vector's face as he snapped his fingers. I got an idea. Gira had opened the doors to greet his guests, a pair of Faunus wearing identical outfits including red hoods, black tunics, both with white trimming and white pants with black boots. The two looked almost identical themselves, both being male, slightly tanned skin, brown hair underneath their hoods, and light brown eyes. Though one was noticeably taller than the other with a fox tail coming from his rear, while the other had fox ears on his head. Corsac, Fennec, it's good to see you. Gira greeted. And you as well, Your Grace. Corsac, the taller one with the fox tail, greeted back as he and his brother both bowed. Dad. Blake quickly came out to join her father, surprising the brothers. Miss Belladonna, we had no idea you'd return. Fennec, the shorter one with the fox ears, said as he and his brother bowed once again. Blake, what's wrong? Gira asked. What's wrong? Why didn't you tell me you'd be meeting with the White Fang? Blake questioned. What are you talking about? Gira asked. The White Fang sided with Eggman. They attacked Beacon, killed innocent people. Blake exclaimed. Gira's eyes narrowed with suspicion as he turned to the brothers again. Is this true? In part, Your Grace. Corsac answered. And that is precisely what we were hoping to discuss with you. Though it pains us to admit, but the Vale branch of the White Fang have splintered off from the rest of our organization. Fennec said. They no longer answer to High Leader Khan but have elected to follow the will of one Adam Taurus. And it is Taurus who allied himself with this Dr. Eggman, who had promised to lend his technology to aid him in his extreme methods. Corsac added. But because of those methods, the Vale branch has been completely wiped out in the resulting attack on Beacon Academy. Fennec put in. Adam Taurus is now regarded as a traitor to the White Fang, though he remains at large. We were sent by High Leader Khan to try and re-establish contact between you and her, Your Grace. Corsac said to Gira. You of all people should understand how dangerous Taurus is. And if he still answers to this Dr. Eggman, who is clearly a threat to all of Remnant, the Faunus included, then it would be wise to confront this threat as a united front. As the Faunus brothers discussed all of this with Blake and Gira, they were unaware that just behind the closed door of the main hallway, were Vector, Charmy, Callie, and Sun, all of whom remained quiet as they listened through the closed door. The crocodile put his finger over his mouth, motioning for them all to be quiet, which they responded to with nods. And yet, oddly enough, Espio was nowhere to be seen. And how do we know this isn't some kind of setup? Blake questioned. I know Adam and I know exactly what he's capable of, she said with a glare. We understand your skepticism, young Blake. Fennec replied. As you say, you have a history with Taurus. But we also understand that you and your family have a history with High Leader Khan. Corsac added. Even if you suspect us, I'm sure that you still have some measure of trust towards her. I would have preferred it if I heard that directly from her and not a pair of messengers that I've never met before. Blake glared. Completely understandable, Fennec assured. If you wish, we will arrange a face-to-face meeting. Gira and Blake shared glances with each other before he answered. Fine. Tell me the place and time and I will be there. For now though, I'd like to reconnect with my daughter. Of course. Fennec bowed. As you wish. Corsac bowed as well. Good day. The doors were then closed, prompting the Fox brothers to step away and walk down the stairs in near-perfect unison. Unaware, that just on the overhang of the stairs that led to the front door, A certain ninja chameleon was perched at the very ledge, completely camouflaged, and listening to every word as he saw the brothers step out. An interesting development, wouldn't you say? Fennec inquired to his brother. Interesting indeed. The traitor has returned, Corsac said, which caused their eavesdropper to narrow his eyes. So, shall we inform Brother Adam, as well as the good doctor? Fennec asked. We shall, Corsac answered as he reached into his robe, pulling out a small communications device. Only for a kunai to knock the device from his hands and pierce it to the ground. No. Espio turned visible in front of the surprised twins with a glare. You shall not. Acting quickly, the Faunus brothers reached into their robes to pull out a pair of identical weapons, looking like mixtures of daggers and wands as one glowed red and the other white. They pointed their weapons forward, unleashing a conjoined cyclone of wind and fire at Espio, who backflipped to avoid it all. Vector! He shouted loudly. Smashing from the window on the side, the large crocodile leapt straight to the shocked Faunus brothers and smashed them to the ground with his enormous hands. They're working for Eggman, Espio stated. Knew it. Vector grinned as he looked to the glaring brothers that he still kept restrained. Never doubt a detective's intuition. Fennec acted first, wrapping his legs around Vector's right arm and spun around to flip himself over onto Vector's back while thrusting his dagger, which glowed red, to strike him in the back with a burst of fire, stunning Vector somewhat and allowing Corsac a chance to lunge his own dagger, glowing white, to push Vector off with a point-blank cyclone and free himself. But as he rolled backwards, Espio had appeared behind him to thrust a kick into his face. While Charmy quickly flew out to smash his shoulder into Fennec's side and push him down. Corsac tried to retaliate by lunging his dagger at Espio, who parried it and the resulting whirlwind with his kunai in one hand and threw multiple punches into Corsac's stomach to disorient him before appearing directly above to land his foot into the back of Corsac's head and knock him to the ground. You can't catch me, Charmy sung mockingly as he flew literal circles around Fennec, who tried to aim his dagger and fire multiple flaming bursts at the bee, but he avoided every single one of them. Not even close. Charmy mocked as he appeared directly behind Fennec, who tried to swing his flaming dagger at Charmy, who not only zoomed under it, but also shot himself up, stinger first, into Fennec's stomach and sent him flying into the air. Where Sun met him as he had leapt up, with some boost from a pair of glowing clones via his semblance, spun Rui Bang and Jingu Bang in its staff form, before raising it to smash him into the ground right beside his brother. The pair quickly got up, glaring at the regrouping Chaotix and Sun before combining their daggers together to unleash a large flaming whirlwind at the quartet. I think not. Espio brought his hands together, forming a ninja sign and activated his leaf swirl technique. This created a tornado-like effect around himself, while turning himself invisible, and also shielding his comrades from the flaming whirlwind that was blown away by the resulting cyclone. The invisible chameleon then dashed past the Albane brothers, moving in between them and knocking them down before he deactivated his camouflage to appear behind them. Corsac and Fennec both got up with growls as they tried to aim their weapons at Espio, only for them both to look in shock and see that both of their respective weapons were no longer in their hands. They caught the smirk of Espio as he now held both daggers in his hands. The shocked brothers were so caught up in their own surprise, that they were left vulnerable for Vector to move in and grab them both with his hands and smashed them into each other repeatedly until their respective auras flashed. Going up, he threw them both into the air, where Charmy had pulled Sun up to meet them. And going back down, Charmy threw Sun towards Corsac, who smashed his staff into Corsac's face while Charmy zoomed straight into Fennec's gut, both opponents smashing into the ground hard before their auras vanished and were knocked unconscious. It's done. Vector called to the house, the door opening as Blake and her parents stepped out. So, it's true. They're working for your enemy? Gira asked. Espio had removed his kunai from the device he had previously neutralized and picked it up. See for yourself. He threw the device to Blake, which she caught. It appeared to be a scroll, with a large hole now in the screen, thanks to Espio's kunai. But when she flipped it over, she saw the unmistakable logo of the Eggman Empire. Eggman, she growled as she clenched the wrecked device in her hand. It would seem that his influence in the White Fang is deeper than we initially thought. Espio said. What do we do now? Charmy asked. We get to the bottom of it, like always. Vector grinned. Team Chaotix is now on the case. Atlas, Schnee Manor. After getting cleaned up and dressed, Weiss walked through the empty hallways of her manor towards her father's office. Her attire was that of a long-sleeved white dress that went down towards her ankles with a slit for her legs, as well as the Schnee emblem in dark gray on the back. She wore white heels as well. I would have preferred a light shade of blue, myself, Weiss thought to herself. But as she walked, she felt the environment around her being colder than she remembered. She felt once again that it was because she was more used to the warmer environment during her time in Beacon, both literally and emotionally from being in the presence of her friends. She soon came to the closed door to her father's study and was about to knock, but briefly hesitated. She hated being back here, talking with him again, and likely being told what to do without any kind of input from herself. But she chose to come here, because she could do more in her current position to help Sonic, RWBY, and everyone else. For their sake, she would face this head-on. Sonic and RWBY would. Weiss knocked on the door 3 times. "Father, may I enter?" "You may." A cold voice came from the other side. She opened the door and allowed herself to enter her father's study. It was a relatively small yet spacious office. There was a chandelier hanging from the ceiling, a glass table in the middle with a pair of plush chairs on one side and a couch on the other, likely to be used for private meetings, as well as chess games, evident by the chess board that was still present on the table. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled countless books, as well as awards, all either had the name, Jacque Schnee, or Schnee Dust Company, on them, along with a framed picture of the Atlas Kingdom and a ticking clock, which provided the only sound in the cold room. And at the end of said room was a fancy work desk with 3 framed pictures on the back wall. The 2 on the side had regional images of the Solitas, and the one in the middle was that of a younger version of Jacque himself. The man in question sat at his desk as he saw his youngest daughter enter his office. "Weiss, so good to see you home," he greeted in a feeing welcome tone. "Father." Weiss nodded as she closed the door behind her. "Why the cold treatment?" he asked. "You can't imagine how worried I was for you. First, your transport home was attacked by Grimm. A small attack, and one that was quickly thwarted," Weiss said. "I see that you forgot your manners," Jacque commented disapprovingly. "But I'm willing to overlook that, given you just returned home for a catastrophic battle that all but destroyed Beacon Academy." "I wouldn't say that it's destroyed," Weiss clarified. "The campus needs repairs, yes. But the entire Grimm population of Vale, as well as the invading force, were all completely wiped out." "So, I've heard," Jacque said. "Everyone, even the staff, were all talking about the golden hero who saved our world." He said that last part with overdramatization, which really irked Weiss as she suppressed the urge to shut her father up. "Though I've seen the broadcast myself, no doubt the media is over-exaggerating for the sake of wanting more views." "Except that I was there, father," Weiss said in a professional yet firm manner. "I've seen the golden hero myself and what he was capable of. And let me tell you, it was no exaggeration." "Oh, really?" Jacque looked to her questionably. "I don't suppose you have a means of getting into contact with him?" "I'm sure I'd love to meet him. You'd hate his guts the second you set your eyes on him, and it would be mutual on his end." Weiss thought before answering. "Unfortunately, no. He didn't exactly leave a phone number." "I assumed as much," Jacque said somewhat condescendingly. "But what's truly surprising is that you're actually home. Is it not what you wanted?" Weiss asked. "You weren't exactly thrilled at me leaving for Beacon." "Perhaps, but you chose to return home of your own accord," Jacque replied before smiling. "I assume you've come to your senses and abandoned this little phase of yours." Oh, how she wanted to punch him right here and now for that. But she restrained herself. "Not particularly. I still believe I can do good for the Kingdom of Atlas as a huntress. But I'm also aware that the Schnee Dust Company's reputation has slowly started to sink." "What makes you say that?" Jacque asked. "Sure, those animals in the White Fang have been more aggressive as of late, but from what I gather, they were all but wiped out at Beacon. Good riddance if you ask me. That aside, our profits have actually gone up since that whole incident." "Profits, sure. But the White Fang weren't the only ones who hate the Schnee Dust Company," Weiss countered. "Now that I've seen what it's like outside of Atlas, I've come to see that our name is actually truly hated, up to the point that many more people will make moves against us. I came back so that I can help show the world that this family works for the good of Remnant." Jacque looked to Weiss somewhat questionably. He can tell that there were some rebellion's intentions in his daughter. No doubt her time away has actually worsened some of her less than approachable qualities. But now that she's returned, and of her own accord no less, he was certain he can fix all that. If she was determined to improve the company's reputation, he may as well use that. I'm glad you think so. Because the Schnee Dust Company will be holding a charity concert in the coming weeks. Jacque said, something Weiss was surprised to hear. All proceeds will be used to aid in the rebuilding of Beacon Academy. As you said, we need to show the people of Remnant that we are on their side. That's wonderful news. Weiss smiled. She honestly never expected this from her father. It was probably pitched in by the board members and a majority voted in favor, something even he couldn't argue against. But she also suspected he had some kind of ulterior motive behind it. I know, and I think it would make a lot of people happy if you performed at the event. Jacque said. May I ask the reason for that? Because you were there. My own daughter, a Schnee, on the ground, defending another kingdom from creatures of grim, armed terrorists, and a malevolent dictator. Jacque explained. Everyone's talking about so much about the golden hero that they've forgotten that. I think it would be best to remind people that they have a reliable guardian at their service, and not some unknown phantom who does not appear to answer to any kind of authority. To show the world that the Schnee family is just as strong as ever. Yep, there it was. Just another campaign to bolster his own image. Am I being asked, or told to sing? I think it would make a lot of people happy. Jacque looked at her with an expression that mixed expectation and a sneer. Weiss sighed. I'll do it, on one condition. She quickly said her father. I write the song. Oh. Jacque narrowed his eyes. No disrespect, father. But you have not been among the people, I have. Weiss explained. I know what the people like and what I feel the correct message would be to show them the value of our family name, and that they are under the care of a dutiful guardian. Something that can raise their spirits, if you will. He thought about it for a moment. You make a good point. Very well, you may write the song. But I would like a chance to look at it myself before you perform. Deal. Weiss accepted. Will there be anything else? No, you're dismissed. Jacque told her, to which Weiss nodded and turned around to walk away, but just before she reached the door. Oh, one last thing, Weiss. This got her attention again. Those were some impressive negotiation skills you just showed. It seems you've picked up a thing or two from your old man, after all. He said with a condescending smirk. She nodded again before leaving the office. The second she closed the door and was certain that she was out of his eyesight, she let loose a sigh of relief combined with a shiver. She had only just got home and he was already ordering her around like she was his little slave. That was no surprise. But what really disgusted her, was that her father seemed proud of something she just did and credited himself for it, saying she got it from him. Just hearing that alone made her want to take a long shower. And yet, at the same time, she felt somewhat amused by it. The whole reason he was even hosting the charity event was because he was upset that the spotlight was focusing on Sonic, and not him. He was trying to take the spotlight back for himself, trying to actually upstage Sonic of all people. He can certainly try, but the idea of him trying to keep up with Sonic was amusing in of itself. You couldn't hold a candle to him even if you tried. He'd leave you in the dust. Pun entirely intended. She smirked before walking away. Making sure the front door was locked, Jacque went back to his desk and opened a drawer to pull out a specially made communications device. One that had the emblem of the Eggman Empire on it before activating it. The device opened up and projected a small holographic form of the Mad Doctor himself in the palm of Jacques' hand. What? Eggman questioned irritably. You told me that I would be safe when you build your empire here on Remnant. Jacque stated. You told me that my family and I will have a place in said empire, while sweeping away the old order. But so far, all I see from you is trouble. The council in Atlas is considering closing off its borders because of your failed attack on Beacon, potentially costing me millions. That's your problem, not mine. I left you this device so you could contact me in case any of my enemies caught onto you. Not for you to bring your complaints to me like a 3-year-old who is upset that his favorite toy broke. Eggman argued. You could have at least told me that the dust I was providing you was going to those animals in the White Fang. Jacque said. Every single one of them wants me and my family dead, and both of my daughters were there during that attack. Oh what? Is that fatherly love, I hear. And besides, didn't your eldest cut ties with you when she joined the military? Eggman questioned. And even if they did get killed off, you got a son following you around like a lovesick puppy, don't you? They're my children, my assets to use as I wish. Jacque argued as he sat down on his chair and put the device on his desk. When it comes to business partnerships, both sides have to be informed of everything that happens. And if you want our partnership to continue, I suggest that you keep me in the loop. Eggman stared at him for a minute, before he broke out in laughter. Oh, ho ho ho. Jacque found himself staring at the holographic form of the doctor in confusion. Why is he laughing? That was not at all the reaction he was expecting. You think that this is a business partnership? I wouldn't say that. A partnership implies that both sides stand on equal footing. The very idea that you even think you're on my level alone is laughable. Now you see, Jacque growled. You're discreetly supplying my forces with dust, sure. But I only went that route because my real partner likes to do things subtly. Eggman began. If I wanted to, I could have targeted Atlas first and wiped that floating island off the map, the SDC included, and taken all of your dust for myself. And before you bring up my setback at Beacon, what makes you think I was using all my forces in that assault? That wasn't even a quarter of my armada. Jacque, face paled at that. And the option of completely taking over your company and that pitiful kingdom is still that, an option that I could undertake if everything goes sideways on my end. Eggman continued. Let me make this as clear as I possibly can. You and the SDC are a convenience to me, nothing more. You are involved with me because you are useful. If you want to be a part of the Eggman Empire, the soon-to-be ruling body of all of Remnant, then you'd better stay useful. I've got no room for deadweight. And if you even think about bringing up the idea of trying to rat me out or stab me in the back, let me assure you that will be greatest and final mistake. There's no amount of money or layers that can protect you from my deadliest machine, which can find you anywhere on Remnant and cut your head clean off. The pitiful man backed away in his chair at Eggman's exposition, already pulling on his collar as the sweat poured down his face. I assure you, Doctor, that I can still be useful to you. The Schnee Dust Company will be a valued addition to the Eggman Empire, I'll make sure of that. We'll see. An associate of mine should be arriving in Atlas any moment now. Eggman said. He'll come to you and we'll see how you can be useful to us then. And, who might this associate of yours be? Jacque asked. A sneer formed on Eggman's holographic face. Oh, you'll know when you see him. A large civilian aircraft flew through the tundra air above Solitas and made its way closer to the floating city of Atlas. Aboard the aircraft, everyone sat down and minded their own business as they read whatever they had on hand, slept, or just gazed out the window if they happened to be next to one. One such man, who sat in the back and in the far right corner, gazed out the window as an announcement was made across the aircraft. Attention all passengers, we'll be touching down in Mantle's port in 20 minutes. Please remain seated as we begin landing procedures. Thank you. Arthur Watts smirked as he looked through the window to see both Mantle and Atlas floating just above it. Good to be home. Chapter 38, The Lonely Desert. A single airship flew above the desert that seemed to stretch in every direction. Bright sand laid out as far as the eye could see, with the occasional rock formation or canyon-like area, but it seemed like what one would expect from a desert landscape. The clear blue skies made it rather beautiful, but the lack of clouds also meant that it was scorching hot outside. Fortunately, for those that flew in the airship that sailed above the sands, they had the benefit of air conditioning. So, this is Vacuo, huh? Rouge commented looking out at the sandy landscape. Certainly big. Yeah, that's a lot of sand. Nora said. Not sure how anyone can live in a desert. Even looking outside, I can feel the heat. According to this, Vacuo has a range of settlements aside from the main city. Kira said as she read some information regarding the kingdom of Vacuo via her scroll. Kennet, and Conkia, and Feldspar, some have CCT towers for limited communications, and Conkia even has a combat school, Oscuro Academy. Hey, didn't Professor Oobleck say that Vacuo used to have its own jungle or something? John asked. It had an oasis environment, yes. Not to mention the largest dust deposit ever recorded in Remnant's history. Ren confirmed. But because of that, it also drew the attention of other kingdoms that more or less tore up the environment for its resources. The people who settled there had grown complacent and had no way to fight back. A minor scoff was heard, causing all their attention to turn to Shadow, who just simply stared out the window. It was no secret to guess what he was thinking about. Humans ruining a lush landscape and nobody but them were to blame for it. Vacuo appears to have little governmental control compared to the other kingdoms. Omega reported, having already downloaded all the data regarding the desert landscape. It seems to operate under the unspoken law of survival of the fittest, where only the strongest rule. If that is true, then this kingdom will soon be under the control of Team Dark. Rouge chuckled. I hear ya, Omega. I wouldn't mind the idea of being a queen, have people wait on me, hand and foot. Ooh, that does sound nice. Nora smiled. Just could do without the sand. Stuff gets everywhere. Rouge added. We would have to fight to keep that position, of course. Ren said. A rather barbaric approach if you ask me. And yet, the main city, as well as Shade Academy, are both still standing, meaning there is some order here. Pyrrha noted. Not for long, should the doctor or Salem arrive. Shadow said seriously. That's why we're here, though. John put in. Look Shadow, I know you said you don't want us tagging along, and honestly I can see you and your team handling this place just fine. You're already on the ship, it's too late to second guess your involvement. The Black Hedgehog turned to the young man who led Team JNPR. If you are serious about helping us, then you do exactly what we say, even if it involves sitting out or finding a place to hide. Understood. John looked away at that. He could tell that Shadow wasn't happy about them tagging along, but he couldn't sit out of this. Pyrrha, his teammate and best friend, was the current Fall Maiden. Not to mention everything that they've been through in fighting Eggman back in Vale, as well as learning about the full story with Salem, he couldn't just sit on the sidelines anymore. Though, as much as he wanted to help, he knew that as he was now, he would be only slowing Shadow down. So, he had to get stronger, and that's what he was going to do as soon as they land. He had to get stronger, for the sake of his world, for the sake of his team. But until then, it may be best to listen to the more experienced and more powerful fighter. Sure, you're the boss. John said, to which Shadow nodded. That's of course if the guy running Shade is anything like Ozpin. Then we'd probably have to worry about fighting him too. That caused everyone on his team, as well as Rouge, to look to each other with concern before Pyrrha spoke. John, we need to talk. He turned to her as she spoke. I understand why you feel angry towards Ozpin and those who work with him, and I do not fault you for it. But, don't you think that perhaps you can tone it down, and be a little more open-minded? John scoffed slightly in surprise. Are you serious? Yes, I'm serious. Pyrrha reaffirmed. This is the first time any of us have been to Vacuo. We know nothing about the region. Whether we like it or not, we will need Professor Theodore's help. That's assuming he doesn't try to backstab us like Ozpin did. John crossed his arms, looking away. We cannot let all our decisions stem from fear. Ren advised. I agree with Pyrrha, it wouldn't hurt to at least meet with him. For all we know, he might be completely different from Ozpin. On that note, I do have something else to say to you, John. Pyrrha got his attention again. Don't you think you went too far back at Patch? What are you talking about? John questioned. About how Ozpin deserved to die. Pyrrha reminded. Seriously, John, even Nora spoke with concern. I get that the guy screwed up. Believe me, I'm pissed with what he tried to do to Pyrrha too. But don't you think that's a bit extreme? Well, he's not dead. John reaffirmed. Apparently he'll come back. Yeah, when his soul pops into another random guy. Nora replied. What if that guy is a dad who has a family? Or a little boy who is just taking his first steps? Did they deserve to have their lives completely turned upside down by some ancient warrior suddenly appearing inside them? Not to mention said man or boy having his soul basically assimilated into Ozpin's. Rouge added. See. Nora gestured to the bat. Okay. John held his hands up. Fine. That's messed up, and nobody deserves that happening to them. And even if it didn't, did Ozpin really deserve to die for all he did? Pyrrha asked, looking to John sincerely. Does making a mistake make his life less valuable? It's a pretty big mistake though. John grunted. Even so. Pyrrha reaffirmed, which caused her leader and partner to look away somewhat. She did happen to catch a glimpse of guilt in his eye, however. And then there's what you said to Kiro, about how he'd let RWBY die like her mother. Hey, that guy was an asshole. John argued as he turned around to face everyone. That doesn't matter, John. Pyrrha stated. You don't bring up someone's late relative to prove a point. You just don't. Especially the mother of your friend. I wasn't talking to RWBY, John tried. But she was there, Ren added. She heard and saw it all. And that was after she woke up from a horrific battle. Even if it was a few days for us, for her, it may as well have been yesterday. Kiro was a jerk, and I'd punch him in the face myself for what he said and did. Nora also said. But maybe you should have yelled at him before RWBY woke up. But, John was beginning to lose his ground with the guilt he was now starting to feel. She said Kiro went too far when he hit you, and he did. Pyrrha confirmed. But you also went too far in bringing up her mother. I didn't say anything beforehand because I could tell that emotions were running high, and I was worried that saying something back then would have just started another argument. Whether or not you chose to be angry with Ozpin and Kiro is your choice, but you shouldn't let that anger get the better for you, or else you might end up hurting someone that you weren't trying to hurt. And whether she said it aloud or not, you did hurt RWBY, even if it wasn't your intent. John looked down, thinking back to what he said back in Patch. He didn't regret saying much of it. He had every right to be angry with Kiro and Ozpin. The former didn't even have the decency to apologize. Honestly, RWBY deserved a better uncle and role model than that. But, maybe he went too far. He happened to glance to Shadow, who had stayed silent during this exchange. The black hedgehog could tell that John was wondering how he felt, so with a sigh, he spoke. Any distrust towards Ozpin and his followers are valid given the actions of himself and those around him. However, we do not know this Professor Theodore and where he stands regarding that. Not everyone on the same side will share the same opinion. And they are correct, we need Theodore's intel if we're going to gain any advantage here in Vacuo. And they are also correct, in that whoever becomes the next host for Ozpin's soul will be forcibly dragged into this battle and does not deserve that sort of fate. In addition, bringing someone's deceased relative, especially a parent, into an argument, is taking it to an extreme. With that, John gave a defeated sigh. Okay, maybe I did take it too far. So, Pyrrha leaned close to him expectantly. I promise to keep an open mind with Professor Theodore, and contact RWBY when I can to apologize to her. John said. That's all we ask. Pyrrha smiled as everyone felt a sense of relief. Nora glanced at Omega with a grin. What? I didn't hear you say anything, Tin Man. I am designed for destruction, not therapy. Omega replied, causing Nora to laugh. You designed for making jokes, though. The pink-clad girl chuckled. I will mock inferior foes if they prove to be an insufficient challenge. Omega replied. This not only caused Nora to laugh harder alongside Pyrrha with John chuckling a bit and even Ren smirked somewhat. Rouge smiled at the student's antics, but when she turned towards Shadow, even if he turned around to keep looking out the window, she did catch the tiniest upward curve on the side of his mouth, which only caused her to smile even more. However, the moment he looked out the window, Shadow spotted something that caused him to look serious. There are Grimm outside. Everyone stopped laughing as they came to the side of the ship that Shadow was at, all looking out what windows they could see towards the sands below, which were picking up from the ongoing battle taking place on the ground. They saw various Grimm scattered across the sand, such as Deathstalkers, Tygetus, Lancers, as well as a few unrecognizable ones like those that resembled bats, and what seemed like three-headed giraffes, and they numbered over 3 dozen. They seemed to all surround a caravan full of people, with what seemed like 5 huntsmen guarding it. That's a lot of Grimm down there. Nora noted. We should help them. Pyrrha stated. Right, first we should land, John was about to suggest, only for a flash of light to shine next to him. Everyone turned to see that Shadow was no longer occupying that same spot inside the airship, but rather having teleported just outside, where he used his air shoes to boost himself down towards the ongoing battle. Well, he didn't waste any time. Ren commented. He never does. Rouge said. We do not have time to land. Omega declared. Open the door and we will move now. I must take part in the evisceration of all Grimm. I will not let Shadow have all the fun. Now we're talking, Omega. Nora grinned as she came to the emergency hatch and pried it open, leading to a gusting wind to pour into the ship with everyone bracing themselves. "Hey, what's going on back there?" the pilot said through speaker. "Grim attack," Pyrrha told him. "You keep going to Vacuo, we'll walk the rest of the way. Don't worry about us. We practiced our landing strategies," Nora said as she was the first to leap out. "Yahoo! All creatures of Grim must be eliminated," Omega exclaimed as he jumped out too. Pyrrha looked with a shake of her head and a half-smile before turning to the rest of her teammates. "Well, shall we?" "Yes." Ren nodded as he and Pyrrha leapt out next, leaving only John and Rouge, the former looking to the bat nervously. "Hey Rouge, I haven't exactly perfected my landing strategy so, whoa." He gave a startled yelp as Rouge picked him up by his back and flew straight out. "I got your back, kid," she assured with a smile, much to his relief as they flew to catch up with their friends. "Circle up," Coco ordered as she wielded Janduya in its massive Gatling gun mode to shoot down all the lancers and bat-like Grim known as Ravagers she spotted in the air. As she did, she and her teammates formed something of a makeshift circle around a caravan of trucks that had formed a circle of their own with a dozen or so people, children included, hiding in the center. Coco stood on one side with her gun while Velvet had appeared on the other side, using her own weapon, Anisadora, to create a hard light copy of Janduya to shoot down any airborne Grim on the other side of the circle. Yatsuhashi was on the northern side of the circle, in between his two female teammates as he faced against a Death Stalker, wielding Fulcrum to block its claws before swinging upwards to slice off its right claw, but was forced to block the thrust of its stinger with the flat of his blade. Though he was quick to act as he grabbed the stinger before it could be pulled back and sliced his large sword to cut that off as well and expose the Death Stalker's face, which he then skewered with a thrust of Fulcrum before slicing outward to eviscerate the large scorpion-like Grim. But as it fell, two more appeared behind it, much to his annoyance. "Having trouble back there, Yatsuhashi?" Fox called out from the other side of the caravan as he and someone else, someone who wore a dark hooded robe, stood beside him and wielded mace, as they faced off against a two-headed King Taijutsu. "Just worry about yourself," he called back. Fox gave a half-grin as he went after the white head of the Taijutsu, wielding his dual blades of sharp retribution, which he used to slice apart the face of the white head before giving a dual X slice to cut its head off completely, leaving only the black head to gun for the hooded individual, who swung his mace hard enough to knock the black head to the ground. Not giving it a chance to recover, the man stomped on the side of its neck to keep it pinned and smashed the head repeatedly until it caved completely. "Hold the line, we got this," Coco ordered her team as they seemed to be keeping the Grim at bay. Only for a series of screams to erupt from inside the circle of trucks. She turned around with a Queen Lancer descend from the sky, using the bright sun to its own advantage to cover its approach and gun for the civilians at the center of the circle. "Shoot! One got in," Coco exclaimed as everyone turned around in shock. "Fox, get in there." "No, I won't make it in time," the blind student thought as he hoped to the top of the truck just as the Queen Lancer lunged its harpoon stinger towards a young deer faunus girl, who clung to her mother in fear as said mother held her child tightly and prepared for the end. Only for a blur of black and red to shoot through the umbilical-like thread and sever it, cutting off the harpoon before it reached its target. A flash of light then appeared behind the Queen Lancer before a slice from a sword decapitated it completely, leading it to fall to the ground, and the one who decapitated it to land just as its form disintegrated. Everyone looked wide-eyed to see none other than Shadow the Hedgehog appear in the middle of the circle, the cowering civilians and especially the little girl looking to him in awe. Shadow quickly converted Arondite into its rifle mode to gun down the Lancers and Ravagers that came down from the sky. The Ravagers were shot down quickly enough, but the Lancers advanced quickly. But Shadow proved even quicker as he teleported in front of the one closest to the group of civilians and quickly cut it down. He then teleported up to the next one to decapitate it like he did with the Queen, then performed a homing attack to obliterate a third and then to a fourth and fifth to take him even higher above the swarm and threw a series of precise chaos spears to finish off the rest before landing dramatically on top of the truck next to the surprised Coco. "You and your team maintain this position and destroy any Grim that get past us," Shadow ordered. "Us?" Coco questioned, still not over her shock. "Yahoo!" Nora's cry through the sky drew all their attention as they looked upwards to see the girl riding her own hammer, Monhild, standing on the mallet and holding onto the pole, while also firing rockets to control her trajectory as she went for a Death Stalker that was facing against Yatsuhashi. She quickly pulled her feet off and swung upward to bring Monhill down onto its face before firing another point-blank rocket to completely obliterate it before landing by the surprised senior huntsman student. Right behind her, Omega used his jet boosters to maneuver and control his own descent before opening fire with his gun arms. Creatures of Grimm, prepare for complete annihilation. A hail of dust bullets rained down on a pack of Xeriphs, tearing them to shreds before landing with a thud in the sand, though he quickly emerged with all his weapons primed and ready. Ren and Pyrrha both let themselves free fall with Rouge flying in John right behind them. Ren spotted a nearby truck and drew Stormflower to fire its grappling hook feature to score a hit on top of the truck, which he used to pull himself downward before reaching the truck, grabbing it with both his hands before pushing himself upward with a flip to land on the ground. Pyrrha, using a subtle influence of her maiden powers, evident by tiny flashes of red in her eyes, manipulated the winds around her to control her descent before drawing her shield, Akoo, and placed it at her feet, which she used to land onto the ground. She then kicked the shield into her hands as Rouge brought John to the ground next to her. No freaking way, Coco couldn't believe what she was seeing, and the same could be said with her teammates. Team JNPR. Coco. Pyrrha seemed just as shocked alongside her own group. What are you doing here? Holy crap. John. The hooded figure with the mace stepped forward, causing the aforementioned blonde to turn to him, but he found himself especially shocked as he happened to recognize that voice. Wait, Cardin. Taking off his hood, the fifth fighter alongside Team CFVY was none other than Cardin Winchester, much to the surprise of Team JNPR, with even Shadow raising a curious eyebrow. However, a loud roar as well as explosion of sand caught all their attention as the group turned to see the remaining Grimm, consisting of 7 Lancers, 5 Ravagers, 3 Xeriphs, 2 Taigetus, and a single Death Stalker regrouped towards the spot where the sand had exploded, revealing a Grimm that was larger and far more grotesque than any variation they have seen so far. This newer Grimm had the appearance of what one could only describe as a giant demonic worm. From the sandy ground to its face, it was about 3 bus lengths and was covered in spiked bone armor with black flesh underneath. It had 4 curved spikes around its face, revealing a large mouth that had 4 smaller curved fangs inside, the mouth looking big enough to swallow a person whole. Reunion will have to wait, first we gotta deal with whatever that is. Rouge said. And I gotta say, that's probably the ugliest Grimm I've seen yet, and those things can get ugly. It's a blind worm. Velvet identified. Their habitats are sandy desert-like areas such as Vacuo. Omega, are there any more Grimm in the area? Like coming from behind us and the people? John asked. The former Badnik performed a brief scan of the area. Negative. All remaining creatures of Grimm are right in front of us, and they are marked for elimination. Alright, Coco, you and your team keep protecting the people. John told her. Pick off any guys that get past us. We'll handle the guys up front. Your edgy friend over there told us the same thing, but we'll do it. Coco nodded. John turned to said, edgy friend. Shadow. Think you can handle the worm solo. We'll take care of the rest. Shadow saw John's plan right away. The young man recognized this blind worm was a complete unknown and that his team were ill-prepared to handle it, not to mention having the biggest threat being eliminated by your most powerful ally was a basic strategy. Though Pyrrha could potentially come close to that spot given her status as the new Fall Maiden, but this way, they can better keep her powers hidden for the time being, smart move. Leave it to me. Shadow nodded before dashing forward. Alright, let's go. John drew Crocia Morse and pointed forward. Charge. With that, he and his team along with Team Dark charged forward at the pack of Grimm. Coco smiled, both at how quickly her fellow student and team leader was able to formulate a rather solid strategy, and the relief that followed upon seeing familiar faces again. You heard the man, protect the caravan and not a single Grimm gets past us. Let's move, people, Coco ordered. Right. Velvet, Fox, and Yatsuhashi all said as they and Coco doubled back to take up defensive positions around the caravan. Cardin, however, stayed right where he was. Seeing John again like this caused all kinds of odd feelings to form inside him. But that would have to wait. Right now, he had people he needed to protect and that was what he was going to do. With that, he went to regroup with Team CFVY. As Shadow dashed past all the Grim, he gunned straight for the blind worm, which lunged itself at him with an open mouth. He responded by blasting himself upward with a thrust from his air shoes and pointed Arondite forward with one hand and generated a surge of raw chaos energy in the other. He shot through the mouth and out through the back like a spear, which followed with an explosion that obliterated half of the head in one shot. However, while he was airborne, Shadow noticed the sand behind the blind worm shifting as a second and identical head attached to the rear quickly emerged to try and devour him while airborne. Fortunately, Shadow teleported away and landed on the ground to face the other head. Of course it has two heads. The black hedgehog was unsurprised. And if it's akin to a worm, then cutting it apart could cause it to multiply. He looked at Arondite for a moment before sheathing it and glaring up at the roaring blind worm. I need to be smart about this. As Shadow kept the blind worm occupied, the rest of his team, along with Team JNPR, engaged the remaining Grim. Omega zoomed straight for the Death Stalker and reached out his metallic hands to grab both of its claws. Omega dug his feet into the sand and used his rear thrusters to push back against the Death Stalker, which tried to press forward with its own strength. Omega quickly noticed the incoming stinger. Acting quickly, double barrels opened up on Omega's forearms and unleashed concentrated blasts of ice dust onto the Death Stalker's claws, resulting in ice spikes shooting out in all directions, which not only crossed together to block and sever the stinger, but even weakened the armor around the claws as they were pierced by the ice spikes. Omega used this to rip off the claws from the Death Stalker completely before pulling his fist back and pounding hard enough onto the face of the scorpion-like Grim to completely eviscerate it. Rouge took to the air with purple hearts to engage the Lancers and Ravagers. She threw her dual boomerang weapons to sever the wings of two of the Lancers and send them to the ground before performing a spinning aerial kick to smash the head of one Ravager before her weapons returned to her, which she combined to form its broadsword mode. Using this, Rouge flew forward to quickly slice apart any flying Grim that came too close to her, already cutting down two more Ravagers and a third Lancer. One Lancer tried to thrust its harpoon stinger at her, but Rouge easily limboed under it to sever the cord of the stinger and spun like a corkscrew with her feet pointed forward as she shot herself to destroy that Lancer completely. When she unfurled herself, she broke her weapon apart again and threw them outward to her left and right to slice apart a Ravager and Lancer on both sides. One Ravager tried to come straight down to her, but she caught her returning weapons and performed a curved slice upwards just as the Ravager descended to dice it apart. She then quickly flew to an incoming Lancer to cut its head off as she passed by and then went for the last one to grab it by its wings and pry them off before lifting her leg up high and brought it down on the Lancer's head to smash it completely. Sorry, boys. Rouge smirked to her defeated foes as their remains disintegrated. But the skies are my turf. Better luck next time. Ren fired Storm Flower at an incoming Xerath as he charged two in response. He made sure to shoot precise shots at each of its eyes. Though he wasn't able to get all the eyes, this did disorient the three-headed giraffe-like Grim enough and caused it to slow down before Ren ducked to slide on the sand and slice Storm Flower at its legs to cripple it. This brought it down and allowed Ren to land on its back before using his blades to quickly slice off all three of its heads. Another one was about to come at him from behind, and he was more than prepared to fight it off. Only for an explosion to erupt at its feet and send it flying over him to land flat on its back. Ren looked with an unsurprised expression as Nora rode on the back of the third Xerath as it tried to shake her off, with his childhood friend and partner using the pole of Monhild to rein in all three heads. This one isn't broken, Ren. Nora called out. But it will be soon. She grinned like a maniac, while Ren shook his head with a slight smile before quickly leaping up and over to the downed Xerath that Nora had shot at. He made quick work to slice off its heads before it could get up. Nora continued to hold fast as the galloping Xerath tried to shake her off, unable to turn its heads back to her. Using this, Nora spun her hammer so that the mallet end faced the left head. She lifted it to grab the head in her bear trap attachment. Bear trap. With a squeeze of her trigger, the teeth snapped shut to cut off the head completely. She then heaved Monhild up and brought it down on its back, causing its legs to cave in slightly, which happened just as she fired another point-blank rocket to blast a hole clear through it and send her up into the air before she came back down as it disintegrated. John and Pyrrha came back to back as the two taijutsu circled around them, moving rapidly that it seemed like they were caught in the middle of a swirl of black and white, their respective swords and shields at the ready. Wait for the heads to lunge. John told his partner. Block with the shield, then go for the eyes if you can, but let them attack first. Understood. Pyrrha nodded, taking a position that put a Koa in front of her with Milo in its javelin form pulled back and ready to be lunged. As they stood their ground, a white head lunged to Pyrrha, which she quickly blocked with her shield and thrusted her weapon to pierce its left eye. Though it quickly retreated, Pyrrha remained where she was. John then faced a black head as it lunged, which he blocked with his shield before slicing Crocea Morse to slice at its right eye, forcing it to pull back. A second black head went for Pyrrha with an open mouth, and she spotted a better opening. She used a Koa to block and force its mouth open while also lunging Milo straight forward to pierce through the back of its head, killing it one shot. The same white head that attacked Pyrrha lunged to go for John. He blocked it with his shield and sliced off its remaining eye. This led to the white head to flail uncontrollably and forcing one whole taijutsu out of its swilling ring to flail wildly in the sand, revealing that its head was the black one that Pyrrha had previously killed. The remaining taijutsu reveled itself. The black head had its right eye sliced out, but the white head was otherwise intact. Deciding to focus on the least damaged one, John relayed his next command. You take the white head, I'll take the black one. He ordered. Right. Pyrrha agreed as they ran in separate directions towards the respective heads. The white and undamaged head lunged at Pyrrha, and she was quick to not only block the lunge with a Koa, but even used her polarity semblance on her shield and whole armor to spin herself up and over and land on the back of the black head at the neck area. It would have tried to shake her off, but the second she landed, she drove Milo in its spear form into the right side of its neck and used her polarity to pull her weapon out from the left side to run the blade through and sever the head off. The black head lunged at John, but he lifted his shield up to strike at the jaw and force it over him, where he thrusted Crocea Morse up into its underbelly, piercing through its skin. John then yelled as he ran straight forward, keeping his sword up high and slicing up its underbelly before reaching the middle part and pulling his sword out with a final swing. This brought the taijutsu down finally. Alright. Got it. John pumped his fist in celebration. John, wait, where's the other one? Pyrrha questioned with worry, causing John to look in just as much worry as he saw the last taijutsu. The one with the dead white head was no longer there. In fact, he happened to see a hole in the ground where it stood, as well as a shift in sand moving towards the caravan. Oh no, John's face paled. Coco. Heads up. Underground taijutsu. Hearing the warning of her fellow beacon student, Coco was at the ready as she fired her massive weapon into the sand as she spotted the moving lump, but it sank deeper underground just as her bullets reached the point, disappearing completely. Damn. Everyone inside, now. Coco ordered her team as they and Cardin moved in, right as the black head emerged in the middle, ready to prey on the frightened and screaming civilians. No. John cried out as he and Pyrrha tried to run, but they wouldn't make it in time. Phew. Asterisk. A cyan-colored laser beam shot through the black taijutsu head, creating a gaping and smoking hole before it fell over dead, much to the surprise of Team CFVY and Cardin. Was that us? Cardin asked, to which Velvet shook her head. Hey, was that you guys? Coco called to John and Pyrrha, the two looking to each other in confusion. What was that? Did you see that? John asked. It looked like an energy beam, Pyrrha assumed. Maybe Omega Ore. A flash of energy caught their attention again as they turned to the roaring blind worm as a series of energy explosions erupted around it. Shadow, John muttered. It must have been him. He probably threw a chaos spear to finish it off. Though he was grateful for the assistance, he wouldn't be surprised if the Black Hedgehog had a lecture in store about celebrating too soon and letting his guard down, which would have gotten some of the civilians killed. Something he felt he deserved as he felt that way himself. The ultimate life form dashed in every direction, with a mixture of his super speed and teleporting. He was literally moving in circles all around the blind worm, throwing chaos spears wherever he could to blast a series of holes through its armor and expose its black flesh, making sure to keep its attention focused on him and preventing it from sinking back underground. He teleported and appeared in the air directly above it before throwing another wave of chaos spears to blast off what was left of its armor, leaving only the black flesh that already had a fair number of holes inside of it. Shadow then landed directly in front of the least damaged head and simply stood there, staring at it defiantly as it growled before lunging forward to smash its face into the sand and swallow him whole. However, that proved to be a fatal mistake as flashes of dark yellow light shined out from inside, followed by explosions from the inside before it moved deeper and through the blind worm's body, causing more of its damaged flesh to break apart as chaos spears shot out from the inside, all while the body itself glowed brighter and brighter from the inside. Shadow then blasted himself out from what was left of the front head he had previous damage, blowing it apart before throwing one final chaos spear into the glowing blind worm. This ignited the residual chaos energy he left behind to send it up in a massive explosion. Boom! Asterisk. A bright explosion of raw chaos energy completely obliterated what was left of the blind worm, leaving a gaping hole in the sand as Shadow walked away, with the rest of Team Dark and Team JNPR coming to rejoin him. Omega? Shadow inquired. Scan complete. All creatures of Grimm have been eliminated from the immediate area. Omega confirmed. Excellent. Shadow nodded. Flashy work as always, handsome. Rouge complimented with a wink. Why not just blow it all up with your big red explosion? Nora asked. Could wipe it out instantly. Be way simpler. Chaos Blast takes too much energy out of me, and I need some time to recover from it. Shadow informed. Remember, they told us that back in Merlot's lab, Nora. Ren reminded. Oh, right, sorry. Nora apologized. And hey, I'm sorry too, Shadow. John said to him, causing the black hedgehog to raise an eyebrow towards him. I know I messed up, but I'm gonna try. What are you talking about? Shadow interrupted, causing John and Pyrrha to look confused. We allowed a taijutsu to escape and it got too close to the caravan. Pyrrha reminded. But, you threw a chaos spear to stop it, didn't you? Shadow narrowed his eyes with suspicion and confusion. No, I did not. That reveal caused everyone to look in surprise. I was focused on the worm. Whatever you saw, that wasn't me. But then, John only looked more confused. Omega. Negative. The robot responded. Perhaps one of your fellow classmates from Beacon. They didn't do it either. Pyrrha said. None of them have laser-based weapons. So, if it wasn't them, or any of us, who was it? Nora wondered. We'll think more on it later, let's try and help Coco and the others out. Ren advised. Yeah, good idea. Rouge agreed as the group of 7 made their way back to the caravan as Team CFVY and Cardin helped the people get back up and ready their vehicles. Well, I'll be damned. Coco said with a smile and crossed arms as she and her group met up with Teams Dark and JNPR. Never expected to see you guys here. Same, I thought you guys were at Beacon. John said. Well, since Vale is now Grimm-free, Professor Goodwich put in the offer for some Huntsman students who were capable to go to the other kingdoms. Velvet explained. Vale might not have any more Grimm, but there's still a lot of nasty stuff going on everywhere else because of that battle. Yatsuhashi added. We volunteered to go to Vacuo, arrived just yesterday. Our first task was to go to a settlement and help escort these people to the main city. Fox said, gesturing to the caravan behind him. Thanks for your help, by the way. Of course. Pyrrha nodded before looking towards Cardin, who looked away somewhat as he noticed everyone's gaze. And why are you here, Cardin? Well, he couldn't exactly find the words, appearing nervous in this group's presence, something that Team JNPR, and especially John, found confusing. This was nothing compared to the arrogant jerk that he was before when they first enrolled in Beacon. If any of you didn't know, his team didn't survive the battle at Beacon, Yatsuhashi revealed, causing Team JNPR's looks to soften, with even Shadow and Rouge appearing sympathetic. When he found out we were going to Vacuo, he asked to tag along. I didn't see any reason to say no, so I let him join us. Coco added. Oh, I see, John didn't exactly know how to feel about that. He still wasn't Cardin's biggest fan. It wasn't easy to forget what he put him through, between blackmailing him before and almost forcing him to hurt Pyrrha. But at the same time, he did feel sorry for him in that he lost his teammates. But anyway, what are you guys doing here? Coco asked. Well, we're on something of a mission of our own. John tried to explain without going into details. Tell you what, since we're heading in the same direction, we'll help you guys escort all these people to Vacuo and fill you in on the way. That sound good? Sure, Fine with us. Coco shrugged with a smile. Let's get these people moving before more Grimm show up, we're sitting ducks out in the open like this. Good idea. Pyrrha agreed. As the group went to help the people get everything situated, Ren looked towards Shadow. What exactly do we tell them? I understand if we need to keep some secrets, but tell them nothing of Salem or the maidens, at least not yet. Shadow instructed. But you can tell them about the Chaos Emeralds. Perhaps they may be of help in searching for them. Alright, I'll let everyone else know. Ren nodded as he went to help his friends and relay Shadow's instructions. The Black Hedgehog contemplated this new development. He didn't know these students all that personally, so he was uncertain if they could handle the truth regarding Salem and the existence of magic. As much as he disdained Ozpin and some of his choices, he could at least understand the reasoning behind keeping Salem's existence a secret given that it could lead to mass panic which would only aid her in the long run. Though having more people to search for the emeralds could be useful, especially since it seemed like John and his team trusted them. But having too many people siding with them could also create some liabilities. He'll just have to see how this Team CFVY performed before potentially bringing them in. In a matter of minutes, any major damage on the trucks of the caravan were repaired quickly enough, and the vehicles resumed their drive through the sandy desert towards the main city. Teams Dark, JNPR, CFVY, as well as Cardin, rode in the back of pickup trucks, keeping an eye out in the sky or sand for any more Grimm, all the while exchanging information and catching up with each other. So, you guys are aliens? Fox asked Rouge as she rode alongside him and Ren in one pickup with Nora and Yatsuhashi in the truck next to them. Kinda hard to see, for me anyway. The bat gave a half smile. Didn't pick up on you being blind right away, but am I right to guess that your hearing and sense of smell are twice as strong because of that? Got that right. Fox confirmed. Most people think I'm weak because I can't see, but I think I'm fine the way I am. Good for you, buddy. Rouge patted him on the back. What about your semblance? Telepathy. I can send people messages via my mind, and they can respond back. Though I do have a limited range, I can't exactly call somebody all the way in Atlas. Fox explained. That'll certainly prove useful, Ren noted. So, you had bear trap installed in your hammer? Yatsuhashi asked Nora. Yep. The pink-haired smiled proudly as she petted Monhild like it were a pet. I know what you're thinking, it seems overkill. At first glance, but you seem to have a good handle on it. Yatsuhashi complimented with a smile. And you're plenty strong yourself. Ah, thanks. Nora punched his arm, causing the big man to smile back. And you got some good upper arm strength there, too. What do you say we do some arm wrestling later? Sure, sounds fun. Yatsuhashi accepted. Meanwhile, John, Coco, Pyrrha, and Velvet all rode in the back of a pickup near the front of the caravan. Chaos Emeralds. Velvet muttered in surprise as she and Coco looked at the images of the 7 colorful gemstones on their respective scrolls. Yes, gems of incredible power, and the very reason Sonic transformed, Pyrrha explained. Into the Golden Hero. Coco finished. He calls it supersonic, but yeah. John confirmed. And he used that power to teleport all the Grimm into the sun. Coco said blankly. Essentially, yes. Pyrrha confirmed. Coco and Velvet shared glances with each other as they both remembered that night in Beacon very clearly. The sight of a warrior clad in golden light eliminating the massive wyvern Grimm in seconds, as well as wiping out all of the Grimm and malevolent robotic forces soon after. That was a moment that they would never forget. But now the emeralds are scattered across all of Remnant. John went on. RWBY, Sonic, and all their friends are in Mistral, Atlas, and even Menagerie to try and find them. We came to Vacuo for the same reason. If we can find the emeralds and get them to Sonic and Shadow. You think they can wipe away the Grimm from Remnant permanently? Velvet asked in awe. They seem to think so. Pyrrha nodded. You wouldn't have happened to see any of those Chaos Emeralds here, have you? John asked hopefully. Nope, sorry. Coco shook her head, causing John to look disappointed, but unsurprised. But you said Sonic and Shadow, meaning, that guy can do it too. She pointed to the frontmost truck where Shadow and Omega were, the robot sitting at the edge of the pickup while Shadow stood up near the front with arms crossed and gazing out in all directions, keeping his eyes peeled for any Grimm. We haven't seen him do it, but yes, he says he can transform too. John answered. And if Supersonic alone can make Veil Grim free, then both of them together could do the whole world. Why do I hear a, but, coming in? Velvet asked expectantly. But, Dr. Eggman, who was responsible for the attack at Beacon, is also looking for the emeralds. Pyrrha explained. And he's allied with some of Remnant's most dangerous criminals to help him. And if he finds the emeralds before we do, we won't stand a chance. Ah, there it is. Coco said. Well, considering the stakes, we'll help you guys out, she said with a smile. That caused John and Pyrrha to smile with relief. Thank you, Coco. That helps a lot, Pyrrha said sincerely. Hey, I'm just glad to be working with familiar faces again. Coco shrugged. John felt the same way himself. Though there was one familiar face he could do without. He looked to a truck riding next to them, where Cardin sat in the back alone, which caused John's own look to grimace slightly. You're not comfortable with him being here, are you? Velvet asked John. Don't get me wrong, I'm sorry about his team, nobody deserves that. John commented. But, it's hard to forget what he put me through. And, I know he picked on you too. He looked towards Velvet, who looked away somewhat. He might have been just a bully for me, but I also know he's not exactly open-minded when it comes to the Faunus. So, are you okay with him being here? Velvet didn't quite answer right away. To be honest, it wasn't easy at first. Coco, despite what she said about not seeing a reason to say no, almost said that because of how he treated me. But, I thought it was okay. That took John by surprise. Why would you be okay with that after what he put you through? Because he didn't seem like the same guy. Velvet explained. You can tell a lot by looking at person's eyes, and his eyes were different. I imagine losing his teammates must have been a big part of it, but he's been different. He hasn't hurt me or anyone, he keeps quiet for the most part unless he has a question to ask, and they're very good questions. He's been taking things very seriously too. I can't exactly forget what he put me through, but I'm not the type to hold a grudge either. If he can help us, that's all I really need. That being said, of course, I don't see us becoming friends and I'm alright with that. Oh, I see. Well, good for you. Way to be mature. John nodded, which caused Velvet to smile back. John, of course, looked away as he thought about all that. He could never see himself doing that. While he really did feel bad for Cardin in losing his friends, he didn't see himself making amends with him, and he felt the same way about Ozpin's group too. He may have indeed promised to keep an open mind and work with them in their mutual goal, but he couldn't find himself forgiving Ozpin or Kiro for what they tried to do to Pyrrha. Maybe Professor Theodore might be the exception, but he'll just have to see what kind of person he was. Meanwhile, Shadow and Omega remained silent as they rode their shared vehicle. Shadow kept an eye out for any Grim visually, while Omega scanned the sands for any that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. So far, none had been found, but they would only let their guard down once they reached the city in the next couple of hours. Not one moment more. Excuse me. Turning around, Shadow looked to a partially open window in the truck where the dear Faunus girl from before peeked out to see him. You look like the golden hero, are you? No, I am not the same person. Shadow answered right away. It didn't take a genius to figure out who this golden hero was. Supersonic was seen the world over, so obviously people were talking about him. And of course, because of their similar appearances, people were getting them confused, again. But, do you know him? The girl asked. I do. Shadow nodded, which only caused the girl to smile with sparkles in her eyes. He's so amazing. I saw him fight off all those scary Grim on the TV. She went on excitably. Just like what you did before. She went back into the car and pulled out a piece of paper that had a childish drawing of Supersonic and handed it to him. Here, I want you to have this. Thank you for saving us, Mr. Dark Hero. Shadow slowly accepted the picture before nodding to the girl, which caused the child's smile to brighten as she went back into the truck, leaving Shadow to look at the picture she had given him. When you obtain the Chaos Emeralds and transform into Super Shadow, you will undoubtedly receive the same credibility as Sonic. Omega told him. It is ironic, in our old world, you were seen as a threat because of the power you wielded. But on Remnant, you can be seen as a hero. A small smile crossed Shadow's face. And you, would you be interested in that sort of reputation? As long as I can eliminate the Grimm and Eggman's inferior models, I would not care how I am seen in the eyes of these people. Omega replied. Of course, Shadow was unsurprised to hear that. Omega has always been content with who he was and his own self-established purpose. The opinions of those around him didn't matter in the slightest. He truly respected him for that. And while Shadow felt the same way, not caring if people feared him or not, as it would not stop him from completing his goals or deter him in any way, something like this felt right. But of course, he had to actually see his objective done first. And that's what he was going to do. He would find the Chaos Emeralds and use their power to purge this world of the Grimm forever. And maybe then, the children who live here can live peaceful lives and not have to train to fight an unending battle where even their futures weren't guaranteed. After a couple more of uneventful hours of riding with the caravan, the group appeared to have reached their destination as Coco was the first to spot a large structure in the distance. Hey, we're here. Everyone stood up from their respective spots in the pickup trucks to see a large pyramid-like structure in the distance. As they rode closer, the group began to make out countless structures that were all grouped around the large pyramid as they noticed more and more details the closer that they got. For those familiar with Earth styles, one could describe it similar to an ancient Egyptian city where the fancy structures like pyramids and other temples were surrounded by lesser-made buildings, with the pyramids being homes to kings while the rest of the city was home to the peasants. Welcome to Vacuo, Coco said to the group as Team JNPR looked in awe while Team Dark observed it curiously. Rouge maintained a smile while Shadow just observed stoically. Once they made their way to the city, Team Dark and their student companions dismounted the trucks as one of the drivers honked his horn to get their attention. Thanks for your help, he said before he led the caravan down the main road and deeper into the city, leaving everyone alone to look around at the city they were about to enter. Wow, this is one big city, John observed. Yeah, big and easy to get lost in. Fox commented. Seriously, this place is a labyrinth if you don't know your way around. No problem though. Yatsuhashi pulled out his scroll and sent a few texts to those of his fellow students, all of whom looked to receive it. I sent a map to each of your scrolls, it should make navigation much easier. Thank you, Yatsuhashi. Pira nodded. But be sure you keep your scroll on you. Coco advised. A city like this is bound to have pickpockets. Look away for a second, and you could lose your wallet. Oh, Weiss would hate this place. Nora chuckled. But you would love it, wouldn't ya, Rouge? She teased the bat. Already digging this city. It's got quite a different feel to it than Vale. Rouge said as she observed the area. A bit more exciting if you ask me. As the group began to walk into the city, Shadow looked towards the large pyramid that stood out above everything else. I'm assuming that is Shade Academy. Yep, easy to spot and easy to get to if you ever get lost. Coco confirmed. She also noticed Ren, who was closest to her, rubbing his face to wipe off the sweat. Feeling the heat, pretty boy. It is, rather hot out here, yes. Ren confirmed. Yeah, I could use a drink of water myself. John pulled on his collar. It's not a good idea to have a hoodie in the desert. Cardin advised. Didn't notice. John commented sarcastically, which only caused Cardin to look away somewhat. You know, since none of us have any place to be, we could help you stock up on new gear. Velvet advised. Your weapons might be fine, but you'll need better clothes if you're gonna last in a place like Vacuo. That's a good idea, actually. Pira nodded. We know a couple spots that can help you out. Yatsuhashi offered. Thanks, but we should really get to the academy, John tried. Go. Shadow instructed, much to the blonde's confusion. We'll likely be staying here for the time being as we search for the emeralds, so you'll need to familiarize yourself with the environment. And she is correct, you'll need attire better suited for the desert. Agreed. In this environment, organics are more vulnerable to dehydration, hyperthermia, and heat stroke, all of which can be potentially fatal. Omega advised. That caused Team JNPR to shiver. Yeah, good idea, Nora said. But what about you, Omega? You gonna be okay with sand getting in your gears? My systems are well insulated to better prepare for any environment, be it a desert, a tundra, or anything in between. Omega noted. Although, I would like to observe any weapons that local hunters may use here, in order to better annihilate any desert-based Grimm as their physiology differs from those encountered in Vale. Well, in that case, I know a few spots that you might like. Coco patted Omega's head with approval. I could use for a change of clothes as well. Rouge added. Even a place like this has gotta have some style to it, and I wouldn't mind trying for a desert style. Alright, John said. I guess we're going shopping. Meet at Shade Academy in 3 hours. Shadow told them. I'll scout the city and learn what I can myself. With that, he sped off, leaving a trail of red energy behind as Team CFVY and Cardin looked in shock. Well, he's certainly fast. Yatsuhashi observed. Oh, you ain't seen nothing yet. Rouge grinned. Alright, so we'll split in 2 groups, guys and girls. Coco instructed everyone. Find what you need and we'll meet at Shade in 3 hours like the edgy boy said. Sounds like a plan to me, let's go. Nora said as the group split off. Coco led Velvet, Nora, Pyrrha, and Rouge in one direction while Yatsuhashi and Fox took John, Ren, Cardin, and Omega in the other. Ooh, these look nice. Nora said as she and Rouge were at a clothing stand alongside Velvet, looking at all kinds of colorful clothing. Rouge even took a piece of fabric in her hands to get a literal feel. It's rather light and breathable, not to mention it feels nice. The Bat commented. Of course, you'll want light and breathable in a desert like this. Velvet said. Nora, I think what you had at Beacon was nice and suitable for Vacuo, but I'd still recommend something that'll make it easier to breathe in. Yeah, I'm thinking something a bit lighter color-wise too. Nora said as she looked at a light pink fabric. But I still want pink and color in it, I don't wanna go full white like Weiss. Hey, what shades of violet do you got? Rouge asked the vendor. Meanwhile, in a similar stall across from it, Pyrrha found herself looking at various forms of lightweight armor, many of which were darker colors with Coco right by her side. Alright, Pyrrha. You dress pretty light already, but you're still gonna want some lightweight armor too. Coco said. Might I'd suggest? Actually, Coco, I was hoping for something completely different. Pyrrha said. No, you're gonna want lightweight armor, trust me. Coco told her. Of course, I meant different for me. Pyrrha clarified. As in, a new style. She took a piece of armor to get a look at her own reflect. I've recently went through a change in my life and I no longer feel the same. A sly grin appeared on Coco's face. So, you and John are a thing now. This caused Pyrrha's face to turn red. Oh, don't pretend. Even at Beacon I saw the way you look at him. About freaking time, if you ask me. No, that's not it. Pyrrha quickly said. I mean, we're working some things out right now, but that's not what I meant by change. She sighed before trying to explain it as best as she could. For so long, people know my face, my name. But whenever they hear the name, Pyrrha Nikos, they think of a great warrior, a fighter, someone who stands at the top with no competition. The invincible girl. Even at Beacon, some people thought that way about me and even Professor Ozpin was no exception. Coco listened closely as Pyrrha continued. Because of that, he asked me to do something he felt I could do because he only saw me for what I was, not who. I don't want to repeat that here. So, you want to change yourself? Coco asked. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate myself or anything like that. Pyrrha explained as she looked at her own reflection once again in the piece of armor. I value my skills as a fighter, and I won't hesitate to jump in and help someone if they need it. But I don't want to be seen as the invincible girl anymore. She reached up to undo her ponytail, allowing her long red hair to flow out vibrantly. I want to be someone who can look in the mirror and smile at the person I am now, someone who is seen as who, not what. I see. Coco understood, coming up and putting a hand on her shoulder. In that case, I'd say you need a complete overhaul. I got a few ideas, but if you got anything too, let's hear it. By the time we're done, we'll be looking at a completely different Pyrrha. She said, looking at her own reflection that she shared with Pyrrha in the armor piece, which caused Pyrrha to smile as she looked to her classmate. Thank you, Coco. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Omega was looking at a stall with various forms of dust, which he appeared to be analyzing with his own internal processor, as well as looking to a stall across from the street that sold various crude weapons. Observation: the dust that is sold here is compatible enough to be combined with the weapons sold in this city. Omega told the vendor, I will obtain every fire, ice, and lightning dust that you have. I would also inquire about water dust, in the event of my organic companions suffering from heat stroke or dehydration. I am no medical droid, but I will not allow my companions to fall. You got the gil to pay for it, Atlas boy? The vendor questioned. Unless you wanna sell yourself. Bet you could make for a good profit. This unit is not for sale. Omega stated. Now provide the specified dust immediately. I must prepare for more desert battles as quickly as possible. At the same time, Yatsuhashi and Ren were both at a clothing stall themselves as Ren looked at a sleeveless shirt that caught his eye. I do like the fabric on this one. Do you have anything in green? Ren asked the vendor. On the other side of the street, John was looking at a stall that had various pieces of armor hanging from it. He took a chest plate to feel for its weight. Wow, it's really light. He observed with a smile and even lightly pounded his knuckle on it. Tough too. What kind of armor is this? Carbon fiber. Cardin answered as he and Fox approached him. Most armor in Vacuo is made from the stuff. It's lightweight, it's sturdy. He took off his robe to reveal a set of dark gray armor that looked similar yet different from the armor he had previously worn at Beacon. First thing I bought when I came here. Oh, I see. John's mood went down the second Cardin entered his line of sight. Right, well, you don't have to, but, Cardin didn't even finish his sentence, looking away uncomfortably. But I would still go for it. Fox suggested, stepping up to break the tension he could feel. I can tell you the armor type. He tapped his knuckle against John's breastplate for emphasis. So, unless you plan on ditching that armor, I'd recommend buying what they got here. What about you? You're not wearing any armor. John said. 'Cause I'm fast. Fox explained. Having armor would just slow me down. But you're not the speed type, so carbon armor would best help you, trust me on that one. John thought about what his senior Beacon student said, and he did have a point. This carbon armor was much lighter compared to what he currently wore. Having the armor that he had since Beacon on for so long did help to build up some physical strength, but it was still heavy and could slow him down. Not to mention the black hoodie he wore underneath it made it rather hot for him in this desert-based environment. Even if his strategic skills did improve, he needed to be better than what he was. In order to protect and be there for his friends and teammates, to be the leader that they deserved, he had to be the best version of himself that he could be. Alright, show me what else you got, he told the vendor. After about 3 hours of combing through the city, discreetly stopping the occasional pickpocket and back alley mugging, Shadow stood at the top of the wall that separated the campus of Shade Academy from the rest of the city, and near the main gate where he saw students departing and entering the campus. Unlike the other students he'd seen at Beacon, and even those from other academies that came during the Vital Festival, none of them had uniforms, which only seemed fitting given what he had learned from Vacuo thus far. If he could describe this city in one word it would be, unstable, both physically and metaphorically. Aside from Shade, all of the buildings were poorly built and could potentially crumble and fall apart from even the likes of a severe sandstorm. In fact, he had seen many people putting their homes together because one such storm that blew by a week ago. While Vacuo itself did have a government, he could tell that most people here weren't interested in listening to it, though Shade Academy did seem to maintain some sense of order as the huntsmen who worked there, as well as several students, were the ones who maintained peace here, or at least kept the crime rate at a manageable level, and even then the pro-huntsmen seemed about as corrupt. And yet, despite all that, Vacuo remained standing. From what he'd seen compared to Vale, there didn't appear to be any huge discrimination between human and faunus, at least not on the surface, which would explain why the White Fang had zero presence here. As Omega had said before, Vacuo seemed to live by the unspoken rule of survival of the fittest, where the strong are welcomed, regardless of their difference in race. That would explain why Shade Academy appeared to be the ruling body of this kingdom. It was a symbol of strength with only the strongest of fighters occupying it, and that kind of strength was something the people of Vacuo respected. Even from the normal citizen, he could tell that they all had the resilience and strength to fight, something he personally respected. If Eggman or his allies attempted to invade Vacuo, he wouldn't be surprised if the vast majority of the populace took up arms to fight back. And he'd be on the front lines with them. Of course, there was still one issue he felt could spell a problem, notably for the students who had accompanied him. Just because there didn't seem to be any discrimination between the human and faunus, at least on the surface anyway, didn't mean there was no discrimination at all. Based on what he read about Vacuo on the way here, and overhearing some small talk during his scouting of the city, those in Vacuo were not fond of people from the other kingdoms, though it was easy to understand why. Vacuo had been invaded by the other kingdoms many years ago, all to take advantage of their natural resources. Though Vacuo and Vale were allies in the Great War, it was likely them uniting against the mutual enemy of Mantle and Mistral that threatened them. And since none of Team JNPR were from Vacuo, Shadow had a sinking feeling that they could be targeted for that very reason, not that he would let it happen of course. But then again, Vacuo's hostility towards outsiders might make it easier to rally them against an open invader like Eggman. However, Salem was another story. Her methods were to plant seeds of distrust, to sabotage from the inside. Even if Shadow and his allies had the advantage on their side right now, locate the Chaos Emeralds in time and transform to purge all Grim from Remnant, that didn't mean that Salem wouldn't be trying the same kind of trick she did in Vale, planting her own agents into Beacon as well as coerce dangerous factions like the White Fang into being unwitting pawns in her schemes. One thing was certain, it was not going to be a simple fight, but he would still fight, nonetheless. "Hey there, handsome." Looking to his side, Shadow spotted Rouge hovering in the air, and she sported a new outfit. The white bat was dressed in a purple Arabian-style outfit. She wore a purple bedla top with a gold outline revealing her midriff and navel, though there was a thin violet sash tied around her waist with the ends flowing off the front and back. Her top had sewn in off the shoulder straps that also had a gold outline. She wore dark purple salwar pants with her usual white boots along with her white gloves, as well as a purple neckline and a purple heart pendant sewn on her top. "Well, what do you think?" Rouge showed off her outfit, to which Shadow just stared blankly, unamused. "Oh, you're no fun." She pouted playfully. "Where are the others?" Shadow inquired. "Should be arriving soon," Rouge answered. "But seriously, what do you think about this city?" "It's a mess," Shadow answered bluntly. "The city itself can be easily torn down. Though the people are stronger than those seen in Vale, even the average citizen. They're ready and willing to put up a fight. Which could be either good or bad, depending on who they decide to fight." Rouge saw Shadow's train of thought. "Oh well, we'll just have to make the best of it. You know I could win anyone over with my charm," she teased, putting a hand under Shadow's chin. "So could you. I can see you being top general here. I lead a team, but that is it," Shadow said. "Do not expect to lead an army. Hate to break it to ya, but we may not have any other options," Rouge told him seriously. "Depending on who is in charge here at Shade, these people will need a strong person to lead and organize them, and you are literally the ultimate life form. Not to mention having military experience with gun." Shadow chose not to respond to that, causing Rouge to roll her eyes. But at least she said her piece. Glancing down the wall, she spotted some familiar figures reaching the gate. "They're here." With that, Shadow leapt from the wall and let himself fall towards the ground, using slight bursts from his air shoes to control his descent before touching down with Rouge flying behind him just as Team JNPR, Omega, Team CFVY, and Cardin arrived, allowing him to see the new outfits that Team JNPR wore. Nora and Ren's outfits were similar, yet different from what they had before. Nora's attire consisted of a white sleeveless tank top connected to a white skirt with a pink lining on the edge of her skirt. She also had a pink sleeveless jacket with a sky blue inner layer and a light blue sash tied around her waist, along with pink elbow bands and white fingerless gloves, black boots and pink socks. Ren wore the same kind of green top he wore before, only the sleeves up to his shoulders were completely gone, revealing only black wristbands that went up to his hands like fingerless gloves. He also wore the same white pants as before, but were now tucked inside a set of black boots. But it was John and Pyrrha who really stood out in comparison to the others, their outfits being a stark difference to what they previously wore. Gone was Pyrrha's old armor and outfit. Now she wore primarily dark brown leather on her top with a brown skirt that was decorated with a red sash and a pair of belts that had metal hanging from the end of it. Her leather top also sported dark gold shoulder pads with black sleeves that stretched down all the way to her hands where she had pair of dark gold gauntlets on each hand. She also wore dark gold greaves with black leather underneath. What stood out the most though was the black cape she wore, which flowed out with her long red hair. John, likewise, appeared to have ditched his old armor and outfit. Now he wore a white sleeveless undershirt with blue slack pants. He also spotted new armor, which was a light gray sort of color, which included only the bare minimum like a chest piece as well as something on his back, lightweight armored gauntlets and shoulder pads, and that was about it. From the looks of things, the groups of boys and girls have just arrived and got a good look at each of their outfits. Huh, still the same style, Ren. Nora observed. You disappointed? He asked. No, just curious. Was kinda hoping you go for a whole desert ninja type of thing. She put her hands over her face for emphasis, giving the image of a ninja mask. Ren sported a half smile. It's lightweight and comfortable. That's all I need. Simple and efficient, yeah that sounds like you. Nora granted. But you too, she looked to John and Pyrrha. Talk about a makeover. What happened to all that armor, John? I got it right here. John pulled a bag that contained all his old armor. Couldn't wear it in this heat and it didn't feel right to just sell it or get rid of it. Suggestion, meltdown said armor and reforge it into weapons. Omega told him. With the right forgery process you could create all kinds of deadly possibilities. I'll keep that in mind. John winced slightly before looking at Pyrrha and her new attire. Whoa, Pyrrha, you look different. I'd say good different. I never pegged you to wear dark clothing. But it suits you. And your hair, it looks nice. Most of the group smirked and chuckled teasingly at John's expense while Pyrrha smiled with a slight blush. Thank you, John. I felt it was time for a change anyway. And perhaps I'm not the only one. She commented upon noticing his attire. Yeah, carbon armor. John patted his chest plate. Light and strong, perfect for the desert. I look forward to seeing you in action with it. Pyrrha complimented. Yeah, you too. I mean, you always look great when you fight, but I think you'll look great in this outfit. Not that I think you wouldn't. John was interrupted as Ren smacked his back. So, are we ready to meet Professor Theodore? He got everyone to focus on their current task. Thanks for the save, John whispered to his friend. Don't mention it, Ren whispered back. I believe we are, Rouge said. Where can we find him? Shadow asked, looking towards Team CFVY. He should be in his office at the top of the pyramid. Velvet pointed to the top of the structure. You can't miss it. Cool, see you guys later. Nora waved as the combined group of Teams Dark and JNPR made their way towards the academy. The office of Professor Theodore was completely different compared to that of Ozpin's. While his resided at the top of a clock tower that was nearly sealed shut, almost like a fortress, this one felt much more open. There were open doorways on each side that led to the outside, a group meeting table at the center of the room, and a bright skylight at the very top. Decorated on the walls were various portraits including one of Ozpin and Theodore shaking hands, another of Leonardo Lionheart, one of James Ironwood, one of Kiro Bronwyn, one of a young girl in a checkered dress holding a pet dog, and others of various Shade Academy staff. Currently residing in the office was Professor Theodore himself and his right-hand woman, Xanthi Rumpole. The man had taken out his scroll at the sound of a beep to look at a message sent to him by Coco. Huh, looks like our guests have just arrived. The headmaster of Shade said. I'm still not comfortable with this. Xanthi confessed. It's one thing to allow those aliens in. Outsiders or not, they have the ability to rid our world of the Grim forever, Salem included. Theodore said. Even so, putting children on the front lines, Xanthi continued. This coming from the woman who encourages her students to beat each other to the point where their aura is about to break. Theodore replied with a teasing half grin. I teach the children to survive. To not become too dependent on someone else saving them. Xanthi protested. Harsh or not, I see that the students are at least prepared as opposed to just dumping them in the middle of a fight like how Ozpin would. Theodore's smile faded. Even Ozpin sees that they are at least prepared, too. But I do see your point. Though the fact that these students are traveling with Sonic and his companions suggests that they may be more capable than you think. So we'll just have to see for ourselves. Fine. Xanthi relented. Not long after that, the door to his office opened as Shadow was the first to step inside with John right behind him. Following them were Pyrrha, Rouge, Ren, Nora, and Omega. Welcome to Shade Academy, everyone. Theodore greeted before addressing the Black Hedgehog. It's Shadow, right? Shadow the Hedgehog, he confirmed with a nod. My teammates, Rouge and Omega. He gestured to his sides. Hi. Rouge greeted casually while Omega just nodded. And Team JNPR, I presume. He looked towards the students. That's right. John nodded himself. Professor Theodore. Please, just Theodore. I'm not exactly one for formality. He encouraged. And this is my right-hand woman, Xanthi Rumpole. The short-statured woman gave a nod to the students. I heard you helped in escorting some refugees into the city, thanks for that. Hey, how about we just cut to the chase? Nora asked. For starters, we know about Salem. Theodore's casual smile faded as he got serious. I've heard, so, I'm guessing Sonic and his friends know about her too. Yes, Shadow said seriously. And are we correct to assume that Miss Nikos is the new Fall Maiden? Xanthi asked, much to the student's surprise while Shadow narrowed his eyes. How did you know? Ren questioned. Kiro had sent me a message saying just that. Theodore answered. With a sigh, Pyrrha closed her eyes and then opened them, revealing a flaming red aura over her eyes to confirm it herself. Yes, I am the current Fall Maiden, though not by my choice. She deactivated her powers, and then caught a grimace on her teammates' faces, especially John's. I did tell Kiro that he could inform his inner circle of this. That you did, Ren acknowledged. Doesn't mean we have to like it though. Nora grumbled. Speaking of, did you know about the aura transfer machine that Ozpin had underneath Beacon? John asked Theodore. Yeah, I knew about that. The headmaster of Shade answered. Well, Ozpin wanted to put Pyrrha inside that. John exclaimed, stepping forward. Pyrrha looked ready to step in, but Shadow held his hand out in front to stop her, to let John continue. He chose her to try and do something that could have changed her completely. Her identity could have been erased. Watch your tone, young man. Xanthi warned. You are speaking to the headmaster of Shade. And you are speaking to the leader of Team Janper. John barked back, something that caused Shadow and even Theodore to smirk slightly before John looked back at Theodore. Pyrrha is my teammate, my responsibility. Ozpin had no right to isolate her and not keep us informed in such a life-changing choice. Even if he was trying to keep it from leaking out, the rest of us should have had a say there, both as Pyrrha's teammates and her friends. I need to know from you right now, did you know what Ozpin wanted her to do, and what it could have cost her? Because if you did, and you think about doing the same kind of thing, then the rest of us are going to walk out that door right now and deal with Salem and Eggman ourselves. Xanthi glared but looked back towards Shadow, getting the sense that he was in charge of the whole group. Are you going to let him speak to us with such disrespect? I'll let him know if he says something that I disagree with. Shadow replied. This was it. The gauntlet had been thrown down. This was the moment they would learn what kind of person Theodore was, and whether or not he could be trusted. That caused Theodore to laugh, much to everyone's surprise, especially John. Theodore then patted his shoulder with a smile. John, was it? It takes a lot of guts to stand up to an authority figure like that. You might not be from Vacuo, but you got the spirit. Very committed and loyal. I like you. John had no idea what to say. He had expected to get into a fight with the way he spoke about Ozpin, so this kind of reaction threw him for a loop. But to answer, while I did know about the machine and what could potentially happen to whoever went inside it, I did not know that Ozpin wanted your teammate to do it. Theodore answered. Team JNPR looked in surprise at that, especially Pyrrha. But, I would have thought Ozpin would at least inform you, she guessed. He probably wanted to wait until he had a clear answer to give. Theodore guessed. But I do agree with John here. Ozpin might have had the right idea, but he went about it the wrong way. He should have been better prepared, probably scouted a few professional huntresses that would be more capable of making a choice like that. I myself can think of at least 3, and not a student. Oh, and for the record, I was against the idea of that machine to begin with. I would have personally given Amber a quick death, put her out of her misery and not keep her as a vegetable. The only reason I didn't was because, as Ozpin said, if Amber died the rest of the Fall Maiden powers would have potentially gone to Salem's lackey and that would be bad news for everyone. But, again, he was wrong to try and put that kind of burden on you. Theodore then bowed his head towards the students, much to their surprise. I apologize, to both Pyrrha Nikos, and everyone in Team JNPR as a whole. He then stood up straight. I'm hoping that we can work together to better protect Remnant and save it from the monsters that want to tear it apart. He offered his hand to John. If you feel you can't trust us, I get it. So, let me have the chance to earn your trust. I'll tell you everything you need to know about Vacuo, and I promise to keep no secrets. What do you say? Again, this was not the kind of reaction John was expecting. But from the look on his face, Theodore seemed sincere with both his apology and desire to work with them. He looked towards Shadow, who only gave a nod before John accepted. All right. John shook his hand. Sorry for yelling. Nah, we had it coming, Theodore assured. He then walked over to Shadow. So, he offered the black hedgehog his hand as well. Shadow accepted the hand. Very well. Theodore had passed the test. With that, all tension in the room vanished as it seemed the two parties had found an understanding. So, where can we start? What info would you like to know? The identity and whereabouts of the Summer Maiden for starters. Shadow requested. Straight to the point, huh? Sure, Theodore said. The current Summer Maiden is named Star Sanzang and she owns a local dojo here in Vacuo. Hold on a minute, Rouge noticed something. She owns a dojo in the city. I had thought that the maidens had to live in isolation for their own protection. Yes, that was also a condition to what Ozpin wanted for me. Pyrrha said, that if I accepted his offer, I would have to disappear. Ordinarily, yes, Theodore confirmed, but Star's situation is different from most maidens. She was part of a nomadic tribe in Vacuo. Said tribe was attacked by a massive swarm of Grim and almost wiped out, but the previous Summer Maiden stepped in to help. She ended up dying in the attack, and passed her power onto Star. I wasn't there, so I don't know the details of how Star obtained that power, but she did try to help her when she was hurt. Guessing she died in her arms or something like that. Star was the only survivor of the attack, along with her younger cousin. The two made their way to Vacuo right before I was about to head out to find the Summer Maiden when I lost contact. Once I figured out what had happened, and learning Star was originally nomadic, we did think it would be easier to have her live that kind of lonely life, but she wanted to stay close to her cousin, her only family, and help raise him. So, I allowed it, on the condition that Star never uses her powers unless she has no other options. And she agreed. Most of the group looked in surprise at that. Given what they heard of regarding the maidens, it was unexpected that one actually had a chance to live a normal life. How did Ozpin take that? Nora asked. He actually liked it. Theodore smiled. I know what you're all thinking, and yes, Ozpin made bad choices in his life, sure. But that doesn't mean he's a bad guy. He was concerned for Star's safety, but she seemed resilient enough. Leo was fine with it too. James didn't exactly like it, thought it was too risky, but he shrugged. Hey, what can he do? Vacuo's my turf, not his. That earned a chuckle from Nora as well as Rouge. Yeah, I like this guy. The girl said to the bat, who smirked in agreement. So, this Star Sanzang is not in any danger? Shadow asked. No, but even if she is, she can hold her own just fine even without using her powers. Theodore replied. Trust me, that woman is a fierce fighter. What about her cousin? Ren inquired. He moved to Mistral, went to the academy over there to become a huntsman himself. Theodore answered. Is he aware of her status as the Summer Maiden? Omega questioned. No, he isn't. Theodore replied. He's not involved in this. Mostly cause that kid's a real scatterbrain. He's got a good heart, but he's way too impulsive and couldn't keep a secret to save his life. Thank you for telling us this. Pyrrha said, though we would like to meet her, if in the event a fight comes, and we need to work together. That, and I could use some training regarding how to handle my own powers from an experienced maiden. No problem. Theodore accepted. So, what else do you need? Right, the whole reason we even came to Vacuo is to look for the Chaos Emeralds. John informed. Those gemstones that your blue friend used to turn gold. Theodore said. You saw that too, right? Rouge asked. You kidding, the whole world saw it. Theodore said with jubilation, surprising most of the group. Oh man, I got chills just from remembering that. The golden hero is known the world over. So much energy. And so much chaos. Xanthi added. Because of that, people are excited, but they're also confused and nervous. The golden hero is an unknown to them. And if they don't know who or what he is, then what's to stop him from turning that kind of power on us? Not to mention a tyrannic dictator who also has made his presence known the world, and bearing all the firepower needed to match and surpass Remnant's only military power. With all that confusion and fear in the air, grim attacks have been stepping up. Many settlements outside the main city are in danger, even our own borders are at risk. Is that true? Pyrrha asked in surprise. Theodore's smile faded. Yeah, unfortunately. I've had to send out most pro-huntsmen in the area to guard the larger settlements, as well as prepare the smaller ones to be evacuated and moved to a safer spot. I even sent that team of students that Glinda sent my way to reach one that was close by, as you know. Thanks for your help there, by the way. Coco sent me a message about what happened. What of your students? Shadow asked. Most Shade students are doing what they can to help local law enforcement to keep the peace in the city. Xanthi answered. But we're stretching pretty thin here. A concerning development, but we are getting off topic. Omega got them back on point. You have witnessed Super Sonic's power at work. Then you must be aware that once his transformation has worn off, the Chaos Emeralds, being the source of Sonic's power, have scattered across Remnant. Their exact location is unknown currently, but the odds that we may find one or two in this region are high. I see. And you need them for Sonic to transform again. Theodore asked for clarification. This guy, too. Rouge gestured to Shadow. Him and Sonic can both use the emeralds. Is that true? Theodore asked in surprise. I think Ozpin might have mentioned that before, but... Yes, I can transform with the Chaos Emeralds. Shadow said. However, Salem is now aware of this herself. She and Eggman are no doubt plotting to comb all of Remnant for those very gemstones. They will tear Vacuo apart to unearth even one. I believe you. Theodore said seriously. Sonic, all his friends, and some friends of ours, are looking in Atlas, Mistral, and even Menagerie. John added. Why not Vale? Xanthi asked. Vale was the epicenter of Sonic's chaos control, the method that was used to teleport the Grimm from the surface of the area and into the sun. Omega answered. The Chaos Emeralds will never appear in the epicenter of such a location. Makes sense, I guess. Theodore said. So, we'll work together to find any Chaos Emeralds that might be here. Alright, looks like we got plan. Nora grinned. Let's get out there and find some shiny rocks. Yeah. Rouge, John, Pyrrha, and even Ren raised their fists in celebration alongside Nora. And I shall destroy any that stand in our way. Omega raised his metallic fist with them. Even Shadow gave a slight smile himself. One last thing though, before we get into all that. Theodore spoke up, getting their attention again. During that night at Beacon, something unusual happened here. Unusual? How? Shadow inquired. There was a bright flash of light that came from the middle of the wastelands around that time. Theodore explained as he pulled out his own scroll. I sent a couple of huntsmen to scout the area and this is what they found. He showed a picture on his scroll, a picture of a large pyramid-like structure. John took it first to get a good look at it and handed it to his friends as Theodore explained it all to them. This thing is even bigger than Shade, and it just popped up out of nowhere. I know that those of us in Ozpin's group deal with a lot of crazy stuff, but this is a first for us. Any of you know what it is? It looks like a pyramid, Ren noted before handing it to Shadow next. One glance at it, and the black hedgehog's eyes widened as he recognized it right away. Pyramid base. That took Rouge by surprise. Are you sure? Shadow handed her the scroll to see for herself. Huh, I'll be damned. It is. Pyramid base. Pyrrha questioned in confusion. It was a base under Eggman's control in our world. Omega informed, much to the group's surprise. Though I never entered the base myself, I was under the assumption that it was abandoned by Eggman. It was. Rouge confirmed. But how did it end up here on Remnant? Did Eggman maybe bring it here? John wondered. Chaos control. Shadow realized. It had to be. There's no other explanation. So, your friend, Sonic, brought it here. Xanthi narrowed her eyes somewhat. Unintentionally, but likely yes. Shadow then began to explain it to them. Chaos control, as you all know, is the ability to warp space and time. That was how Sonic was able to wipe away the Grimm from the Kingdom of Vale. He used chaos control to teleport the Grimm into the sun. However, Perhaps using chaos control in such a simultaneously precise and broad manner must have created an aftershock, perhaps something similar to a sonic boom when the sound barrier is broken, which reached our world and pulled the abandoned pyramid base to this world. Can we be certain that this is the only location from our dimension pulled here via chaos control? Omega inquired. Shadow narrowed his eyes in contemplation as he heard that. If Pyramid Base ended up on Remnant because of chaos control, did other locations from their world end up elsewhere on Remnant? And if that was indeed the case, using chaos control to eliminate the Grim again via a super transformation might not be the best idea. But they still had to find the emeralds regardless, if anything, to keep them from falling into the wrong hands. We'll need to contact Sonic and the others as soon as possible, inform them of what we've learned and seen here. Shadow said. What about that base? Ren asked. We can't just leave it. He then turned to Theodore. Did Eggman arrive? Make that base his new base here for Vacuo. I can't say for sure, but my scouts didn't get too close to the perimeter. The headmaster of Shade explained. Mostly because they spotted guards. He pulled up another series of pictures on his scroll to show photos of patrolling badniks, consisting mostly of egg pawns. Once I saw that they looked like what that Eggman fellow had at his disposal, I ordered my scouts to retreat. Then I heard you were coming. Figured to best leave it to people who have experience with that sort of thing. It already has guards. John asked in surprise. So maybe Eggman is there. Nora assumed. Unlikely. Omega replied. Eggman would have already established a controlled territory in the region. Yep, he'd have way sturdier defenses than a few patrolling badniks. Rouge added. Automated defenses, maybe. Pyrrha asked. No, not Eggman's style. Rouge replied. He never returns to his old bases, and he usually just leaves anything he doesn't need there, calling it all obsolete junk. He's sloppy like that. This caused John to look away, thinking to himself. But someone is controlling those badniks. Ren said. We should check it out ourselves. Agreed, after we contact Sonic and the others. Shadow stated. Why stop with just checking it out? John spoke up. Rouge, you said that Eggman usually leaves all his old stuff behind at his bases, right? Right. Rouge confirmed, not sure where he was going with this. What about old computers? John wondered. If there is something there, and we get it online, maybe we can use it to tap into Eggman's network and find out more about what he and Salem are planning. A potential backdoor into the egg net, Shadow realized. Ingenious. Let's do it. John looked in surprise. Why, you're agreeing with my idea. It's a solid plan, one that could lead us to gain valuable intel on the enemy. Shadow confirmed with a nod. We'd be foolish to let an opportunity go to waste. Smart move. Hearing Shadow approve his plan like this and provide his support caused something to bubble inside John, a sense of pride in his own plan as well as growing admiration for the black hedgehog that he found himself admiring and looking up to more and more. As a smile formed on his face, Nora wrapped her arm over his shoulder in buddy style. That's our leader, John. Way to use that brain of yours. She punched him in the side playfully. It's a good idea. Ren nodded with a smile. It's genius, even. Well done, John. Pyrrha smiled herself. Such a strategy could have us learn a potential weakness that Eggman and Salem possess. Omega stated. If such a weakness exists, then we will exploit it. Violently. You guys, John couldn't help but feel humbled as his friends voiced their support. And with it, his confidence only grew. Yeah, let's do it. Well, guess we know what we're doing next. Rouge said. I can see why Ozpin made you the leader of your team, John. Theodore told the young huntsman in training. You got a good head on your shoulders, use it. Yeah, thank you. John stood up straight. Although, whatever you find there, I expect to be kept in the loop. Theodore said seriously. Of course. Shadow nodded. I would also advise caution. Theodore added. Even if Eggman isn't occupying that base anymore, someone is, and we don't know who that is. That being said, perhaps we can recommend one of our student teams to join you. Xanthi offered. Actually, professors. Pyrrha raised her hand. If we're to be joined in this mission, then I know the perfect team to serve as backup. A mission? Already? Velvet asked in surprise as she and her own teammates, as well as Cardin, stood outside Shade Academy, facing teams Dark and JNPR, who had informed them of the situation. Damn, you guys work fast. Coco complimented, tilting her sunglasses down ever so slightly. Basically, Professor Theodore wants us to investigate a potential base connected to Eggman, and we think we can get some useful intel out of it. John suggested. Though someone else may be occupying the base, someone dangerous, so the professor suggested that we at least have some backup. Pyrrha said. And since our teams are more familiar with each other, we'd be better cooperating than having you paired up with an unfamiliar team here from Shade. Yatsuhashi saw where this was going. Sounds reasonable. Sure, we'll babysit you guys. Fox joked. Babysit. Buddy, you're the ones need babysitting. Nora joked back. Hey, we're the senior students. Fox gestured to himself with joking pride. You're still newbies. Maybe yes, but not those three. Nora gestured to Team Dark. These guys are total juggernauts and can wipe out anything that can stand against them. You could learn a thing or two from them. Provided you don't slow us down. Shadow commented. While having Team JNPR working alongside them was acceptable, and he understood the reasoning behind Theodore's suggestion of having a backup team, having so many people together could give a few more risks. But then again, this could also be the opportunity for Shadow to see what this group can do. And if they prove themselves, then perhaps they can be brought into their circle to join the fight. Oh, is that a challenge, Edge Boy? Coco leaned in close with a daring grin. Well, challenge accepted. We'll show you just how deadly Team CFVY is. Before we go though, Rouge tossed Shadow a grayish-brown robe. Put that on. It'll keep the sand out of your face. The black hedgehog looked to his teammate questionably. Hey, everyone else besides Omega's got new looks, you could use one yourself. You picked that out for him. Here I thought you had style. Coco teased. Oh, I do. But you try getting this guy in a suit or something and see how far you get. Rouge replied. Besides, I know this guy and what suits him. Seeing how little choice he had, and to avoid the constant nagging of Rouge, Shadow put the robe on. It was a simple grayish-brown robe with no special features to it, other than an attached scarf he could use to put over his face and keep the sand out, not that it bothered him before, having been in deserts in the past. Hey, that actually looks good on him. Coco commented. Told ya. Rouge smirked. Yeah, really rocking the whole desert bandit vibe. Nora smirked. Hell, I can see this guy being a bandit king. The group shared a laugh with even John chuckling as Cardin came up to him with a cough, drawing his attention. So, looks like we're working together. First time, huh? He offered his hand. Seems like it. Just try and keep up. John said as he walked away, not even shaking Cardin's hand, which caused him to look down with a sigh. One could say that was cold and hypocritical of John given that he accepted working with Theodore, and Ozpin's group by extension, here. But at least none of them went out of their way to mess with and humiliate his friends like the way Cardin did. He'll work alongside him if he's sticking with Team CFVY for whatever reason, but that didn't mean he'd have to like it. Alright, before we leave, there's something I gotta say. John then turned to his team. Pyrrha, Nora, Ren, I know I'm not exactly the world's greatest huntsman or anything, and maybe I won't ever be. But I'm going to try and get as close as I can. I promise, I will do my absolute best to be the leader that you guys deserve. And whatever happens, I'll work with and protect you all. I swear on my family's name of Ark. His teammates looked to each other in surprise, not expecting this sort of thing from John. But they could tell right away from his tone that this wasn't a boast or an attempt to stand out or show off, he had meant every single word. He was taking his duty as leader very seriously. With a smile, Pyrrha walked up to him and took both of John's hands in her own. Thank you, John. And I promise, I'll do everything I can to help and support you, with all my heart. All your heart, huh? Coco smirked knowingly, but also with pride at how John was handling his responsibility. As a fellow leader herself, she approved. You may be the leader, but we are a team. Ren put a hand on John's shoulder. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Got that right. Nora agreed, punching John in the arm. We're in this together, and nothing is going to change that. John smiled with emotions clear in his eyes. Thanks guys. And while everyone seemed proud and approving of John's commitment to his team, Shadow couldn't help but notice something in the message he was giving, even if it wasn't John's intent. Despite him taking his responsibility seriously, there was an underlying tone of self-depreciation in there as well. Perhaps he had best keep an eye on him. After all, he knew self-depreciation and how self-destructive it was better than anyone. Okay, Team Dark JNPR, let's move out. John said to everyone. Team Dark JNPR. Ren asked. Well, we're basically working together as one team now. It makes sense to share a name. John said. I like it. Hira accepted with a smile. Team Dark JNPR. Nora said aloud with a grin. Yeah, I like the sound of that. Fine with me. Rouge shrugged. You boys okay with it? She asked Omega and Shadow. Affirmative. Omega answered. As a conjoined unit, we should be capable of far greater destruction than we were before. It's fine. Shadow nodded. Well, you heard the man, let's move out. Rouge said as John and Coco led their respective teams out of the gate, exiting the campus and entering the city. Oh, but before we hit the road, we gotta contact Ruby and the rest of our friends. John said to Coco. Sure, do what you need. She replied. As the group walked away, Shadow ended up hanging the back. Although, he stopped for a moment. Even if it was for a split second and out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a brief twinkle of light. He turned to the source of where he thought he saw it, over by the corner of the wall that separated Shade's campus from the rest of Vacuo. But as he looked, he didn't see anything there. But he knew he saw something, and with that came the sneaking suspicion that they were being watched. Shadow. Hira called to him. Is something wrong? No. Let's go. He replied before catching up with the rest of the group. However, unbeknownst to said group, he was indeed being watched. There was a figure hiding around the corner, standing on a ridge near the top of the corner of the outer wall. This individual wore a black robe with a hood to cover their body and the upper part of their head. They even wore an unusual mask to conceal their face. Said mask appeared to be metal, made from a shiny yet partially worn-out silver with 3 holes covering the right side of the face, and a single blue optic on the left side. They also carried an unusual device in their hand. The mysterious person used their mask to zoom in on the location of the Team Dark and the 2 teams of students that had joined them before leaping from their position to follow and tail them from a distance. And this at the end of part 17 this what if. Hope you guys like it. Do not forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.